Chapter 452. Le Chien Emperor felt as if he had been hit in the head with a golden pie. He immediately laughed out loud. Good. Good. When these two children are together, they will be a perfect match. Fort Lord, from today onwards, we are in-laws. We will definitely not let Huang fail your daughter and will make her the crown prince consort. Although Tian Xingyu was a little disappointed, he had already achieved his goal. Using his daughter to get such a marriage was also a pleasant surprise. He did not object anymore. Ji Yunhuang's face was pale. He kept trying to say something, but his mouth did not belong to him. Not only that, his body did not seem to belong to him anymore. He slowly walked in front of Tian Xueqing and extended his hand to her. Tian Xueqing's face was bright red. She was so nervous that she did not know what to do. However, she still extended her hand and let him hold it. Ji Yunhuang could not help but hold Tian Xueqing's hand. The hand in his palm was soft and tender, warm and delicate. His heart, however, was ice-cold. Holding her hand in front of everyone meant that he had acknowledged this marriage. He could not go back on his words. Xuemo. Xuemo. Could it be that we are not fated to be together? The carriage was sent off by the crowd. Inside the carriage, Han Shanue's voice transmission talisman lit up again. My lord, what are your orders? The voice from the talisman belonged to the person who was following Ning Xuemo. Han Shanyu was silent for a moment before he finally said, Did she stop when she left the city? Did she turn back to look? The person on the other side of the talisman was slightly stunned. He did not understand why his lord would ask this, but he immediately replied, No. My lord, she ran away immediately after leaving the city. She did not turn back. There should not be any accomplices who met up with her. My lord must think that she has accomplices, so he asked this question. The person guessed in his heart. There was no response from the talisman for a long time. The person did not know what his lord was planning. He asked tentatively, My lord, do you want me to follow her again? No need. Han Shanue's voice turned cold. He turned off the voice transmission talisman, and the carriage fell into silence. It was unknown when a wedding dress had appeared on his lap. The fiery red wedding dress seemed to be woven from the clouds in the sky. It was soft and silky, and it shimmered faintly in the carriage. There was also a phoenix coronet beside it. The design was luxurious and unique. Not to mention anything else, just the luminous pearl the size of a pigeon egg on top of the coronet was priceless. His finger slowly brushed past the wedding dress and phoenix coronet. Suddenly, his eyes darkened and a white light appeared on his fingertips. That set of priceless bridal clothes and phoenix coronet turned into dust under his palms. The sun was already setting in the west. Ning Xuemo was resting on a big rock by the roadside. Kirin was still lying on the side in the form of a horse. He lowered his head and looked as if he had gotten himself into trouble. From time to time, he would glance at Ning Xuemo's robe. There was a suspicious patch of red on her gown, very conspicuous and conspicuous. Ning Xuemo's escape this time was actually very smooth. She was afraid that Han Shanyu would send people to chase after her, so she disguised herself as a man and escaped. In order to make it more realistic, she even made a male companion on the way and called him brother. After they became familiar with each other, they left the city together. After leaving the city and riding for a while, Ning Xuemo found an excuse to break up with the scholarly man. Then, she rode Kirin all the way. When Ning Xuemo left the city, she vaguely felt that someone was following her. Chapter 453. When Ning Xuemo first left the city, she vaguely felt that someone was following her. However, after searching for a few times, she still could not find the person who was following her. Her heart was perturbed, so she let the little Cheline run at its fastest speed. Like a gust of wind, after running for 4 to 6 hours, she was already 700 to 800 miles away from the capital city. The consequence of running like that was that Ning Xuemo was sweating. The little Cheline was also sweating. Then, the red paint on Kirin's body started to fade and stained Ning Xuemo's robe and pants. Ning Xuemo seemed to have something on her mind. The bottom part of her robe was red, but she did not seem to notice it. Her eyes were staring at the setting sun in the sky. From time to time, other passers-by would pass by, and every passerby would glance at her. Karine could not help but ask, "Master, do you want to change your robe?" Ning Xuemore was still a little absent-minded. "I don't need to change anymore. I have already changed 3 or 4 sets of clothes along the way, and there are no more people following me." But your clothes are dirty." "Dirty? It doesn't matter if it's dirty. It won't attract attention," Ning Xuemore answered casually. Then, she looked at herself and suddenly jumped up. Why did she look like she was on her period? No wonder she felt that the passers-by were looking at her strangely. Could it be that this little body of hers was finally on its period? Ning Xuemore did not have time to think so much. She jumped up and ran to a place where there was no wind and changed into a new set of clothes. At this time, the pursuers were still nowhere to be seen. It seemed that the person would not send anyone to chase her. She did not need to wear men's clothes anymore. Of course, she did not dare to revert to her original appearance. She returned to the main road with her sickly face. When she was changing her clothes, she also noticed that her period did not come. Then, the culprit that stained her pants red was, when she came back, she touched Karine. As expected, her hand was red. She couldn't help but rub her eyebrows. The quality of the pigments in this era wasn't up to standard, and the color faded too badly. "Master, can I wash off the red paint on my body? It's so oily and uncomfortable." Karine shook its body. It felt itchy all over, as if it was allergic. Ning Xuemore thought for a moment and sighed. "All right, then don't turn into a horse anymore. Turn into a fox." Karine was overjoyed and jumped up to find a place to take a bath. A moment later, it returned and turned into a blue fox. "Master, where are we going?" Karine was at a loss. "To Daliang City." Ning Xuemore had already asked the people along the way. Daliang City, which was the city between Changkong Country and Xianming Country, was just 100 kilometers ahead. She would first go there to rest before heading to Xianming Country to find a place to settle down. Ning Xuemore was about to stand up when she suddenly heard the sound of a zither swaying in the air. The sound of the zither was faintly discernible, like falling flowers dancing. Ning Xuemore had just stood up when she was shocked by the sound of the zither. Her calf accidentally hit a sharp corner of a big rock next to her. Her skin was cut, and blood immediately gushed out. "Damn it!" Ning Xuemore cursed under her breath and looked down at her injured leg. The crisp sound of silver bells and the sound of a zither gradually approached. Ning Xuemore raised her head to take a glance and saw that it was a rather luxurious and noble-looking carriage. Furthermore, the sound of the zither was not the blackwave zither that she feared the most. She did not think too much about it. She lifted her skirt and rolled up her pants, wanting to apply some medicine on her injured leg. Chapter 454. The carriage stopped next to Ning Xuemore, and a little girl jumped out. She looked at Ning Xuemore and asked, "Miss, are you hurt?" Ning Xuemore turned around and looked at the little girl. She was dressed like a servant, so she must be a maid from a wealthy family. She nodded and continued to apply medicine to her injured leg. "May I know where Miss wants to go? If it is convenient for you, I can give you a ride." The door of the carriage opened, and a beautiful woman appeared. Her voice was like a gentle breeze, clean and warm. Had she met a living Lei Feng? Ning Xuemore turned around and looked at the woman. She looked like a young lady from a wealthy family. Her eyes were clear, and her clothes were simple yet elegant. "I am going to Daliang City. May I know who you are?" The girl's eyes lit up. "What a coincidence. I am also going back to Daliang City. If you don't mind, you can come with me." Ning Xuemore glanced at the maidservant. That maidservant looked at her young miss with a helpless expression. If she was not pretending, then this young lady was always doing good deeds, which made the little girl feel helpless. Ning Xuemore smiled and said, "Okay, thank you." She carried the blue fox and got into the carriage. "Hey, it is okay for you to get into the carriage, but don't bring a pet." The little girl could not help but shout, "My young lady is allergic to pet fur." Before she could finish her sentence, the blue fox's blue eyes were fixed on her face. The little girl suddenly felt dizzy, and when she woke up, she was already in the carriage. The carriage started to move again. Ning Xuemore quickly treated her injured leg in the carriage. The girl in front of her looked at her with admiration. "Miss, do you know medicine? I know a thing or two about traveling." Ning Xuemore was dressed like a chivalrous woman for convenience. The girl looked at her with envy. "Miss, you are so free and easy. It would be great if I could be as free and easy as you." Ning Xuemore was speechless. Free and easy? She was now running all over the place. Every day, she was on the run. How could she be happy? Ning Xuemore was very good at reading people. Her eyes were sharp. After talking with this young girl for a while, she knew all the details of this young lady in front of her. The young lady's name was Yang Ziyuan. She was the only daughter of the city lord of Daliang City. She had gone out to watch the Celestial Master's enthronement ceremony and had only returned after watching the show. Ning Xuemore had already noticed that the horse pulling the carriage was a rare good horse. Even in the royal family, there were only a few horses like this. It seemed that this young lady was very favored. This girl was only 15 or 16 years old. At first glance, one could tell that she had not experienced any hardships. She was innocent, kind, lively, and cheerful. Talking to her made Ning Xuemore feel like she was bathing in the spring breeze. Chapter 455. Ning Xuemore listened quietly. When she heard that Ji Yunhuang did not reject Tian Xueqing's marriage and even held hands with her, she heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she felt a little upset. She had a good impression of Ji Yunhuang and knew that he had feelings for her. However, due to various misunderstandings, she could no longer accept Ji Yunhuang. She knew that they were not fated to be together. This was also good. He finally had someone he loved and she did not need to feel guilty towards him anymore. But, was Ji Yunhuang really willing to marry her? With his personality, his feelings should not have changed so quickly. Could it be that Han Shanyu was behind this? With Han Shanyu's character and methods, he did not seem to have a bottom line. He could really do something like this. However, regardless of whether Han Shanyu was behind this or not, Ji Yunhuang marrying Tian Xueqing was already set in stone and could not be changed. After Ji Yunhuang was injured, he lost more than 2/3 of his power. If he really married Tian Xueqing, he would be able to recover quickly. This should be a good thing for him. When Yang Ziyuan talked about the new heavenly master, her eyes shone brightly and her words flowed like a river. Ning Xuemore seemed to see the scene from her mouth. No matter where that person went, he was a shining presence. He only left the stage after the ceremony. When she broke his barrier, he probably did not notice it. Or maybe he did notice it, but he did not care whether she stayed or left. Ning Xuemore felt that her mentality was a little strange. She was afraid that he would send people to chase after her, but he did not. She felt a little lost. After 2 hours, the carriage entered the city. Yang Ziyuan had already treated Ning Xuemore as a friend. After entering Daliang City, she invited Ning Xuemore to her residence as a guest. Ning Xuemore actually did not want to interact with officials. She was currently on the run and it would be too obvious if she interacted with officials. Thus, she politely declined. Not long after entering the city, she parted ways with Yang Ziyuan and left. Probably because she was too tired, Ning Xuemore slept in the inn for an entire day. When she woke up, it was already past noon of the next day. She went out for a stroll and bought some necessities for the journey. Just as she returned to the inn, she saw Yang Ziyuan's carriage parked outside the inn. Ning Xuemore was stunned. Then she saw Yang Ziyuan's maid jump down from the carriage. "Miss Xue, my miss invites you." The curtains of the carriage were also half opened, revealing half of Yang Ziyuan's small face. She repeatedly waved at her, "Xue Xue, come quickly." Ning Xuemore didn't tell Yang Ziyuan her real name. Instead, she gave her a random name, Xue Xue. Xuemore thought that she and this Yang Ziyuan were just strangers who met by chance and met in the blink of an eye. Therefore, she was too lazy to think of a pseudonym. Chapter 456. Ning Xuemore was just itching to test her skills yesterday. She also felt that Yang Ziyuan's personality was quite similar to hers, so she said a few more words. She did not expect Yang Ziyuan to regard her as a teacher. This time, she insisted that she go and take a look. She even said that it was not just a Guqin recital in the boudoir. There would also be outstanding scholars and refined scholars participating. There would also be a prize, and Ning Xuemore was more interested in that prize. Phoenix Crystal Wood. Currently, Ning Xuemore's wood psychokinesis had already reached the 4th level. These past few days, she had encountered a bottleneck and was stuck at the 4th level, unable to break through. She remembered that Han Shanyu once told her that there was a shortcut if she wanted to break through this bottleneck. That was to absorb the energy of the Phoenix Crystal Wood. The Phoenix Crystal Wood was extremely rare, and it was produced in Daliang City. However, Ning Xuemore did not know exactly where it was produced in Daliang City. Ning Xuemore came to Daliang for 2 reasons. One was to come out of isolation here. The other was to find out about the whereabouts of the Phoenix Crystal Wood. She did not expect that it would be the prize for this Guqin recital. This time, Ning Xuemore had to go. She didn't know where the little Chelene had run off to play. Fortunately, Ning Xuemore had telepathy with it, so she knew that it was happily gobbling up food somewhere. Thus, she didn't bother to inform it. Daliang City was a peninsular city. It was surrounded by mountains on one side and water on 3 sides. There were many lakes in the city. It was not an exaggeration to say that half of the city was surrounded by mountains and half a lake. The Guqin recital was held at the largest lake in the city, Qianming Lake. Qianming Lake was as big as Hangzhou's West Lake. It had a quaint stone bridge, boats, lotus leaves, and a boundless green lake. Regardless of day or night, the scenery was beautiful. When Ning Xuemore arrived with Yang Ziyuan, the sun had just set. The setting sun melted the gold, and the distant mountains were beautiful. Pleasure boats floated back and forth on the lake, and a flock of egrets flew in the sky. Ning Xuemore stood in a gazebo by the lake. Looking at the beautiful scenery of the lake and mountains, the gloominess in her heart seemed to have disappeared. She stretched her arms and took a deep breath of the fresh air by the lake. Freedom. It felt good to be free. Ever since she had transmigrated, she had rarely felt so relaxed. She looked at herself. Her red dress fluttered in the wind, making her look exceptionally valiant and formidable. In order to avoid trouble, her face was still the same as yesterday. She had thick black eyebrows and sallow skin. With high-end makeup skills, her cheekbones were protruding and her mouth was a size bigger than before. Her current appearance was poles apart from her former appearance. Only those who were extremely familiar with her would be able to find her original shadow and recognize her from her current appearance. In fact, Ning Xuemore obviously worried too much. Even if she didn't put on makeup, her original acquaintances might not be able to recognize her at a glance. After all, after soaking in the hot spring, not only did she grow taller, her appearance was no longer as young and immature as before. Her figure was even more curvaceous. Even if Ji Yunhuang came, it would be difficult for him to recognize her at a glance. Looking at the beautiful scenery, Ning Xuemore suddenly had the urge to howl. Although her temperament was calm, she was still a 20-year-old girl. She had the lively nature of a young girl. In the modern world, when climbing mountains or swimming lakes, she would often howl a few times at the highest point to relieve the pressure in her heart. Now, she had this desire again. Chapter 457. Because the Guqin recital wouldn't start until after dark, most of the people hadn't arrived yet, so there weren't many people by the lake. There were only 3 people in this pavilion, her, Yang Ziyuan, and her little maid. Ning Xuemore faced the vast lake and shouted at the top of her lungs. Ah! His voice was clear and long, spreading far and wide. The mountains in the distance seemed to respond. Arth! Ning Xuemore's sudden shout startled Yang Ziyuan. She looked at her with her eyes wide open. Shue shue, you? Ning Xuemore pulled Ziyuan's hand and made her face the lake. She smiled and said, Ziyuan, why don't you give it a try? It's very comfortable. Yang Ziyuan's eyes lit up. She really wanted to shout out loud, but it was inappropriate for a girl to shout in this place. She was afraid that if her father knew about it, he would miss her again. The young maidservant also used the same reason to persuade Yang Ziyuan not to shout. While Yang Ziyuan was hesitating, Ning Xuemore said casually, people live for themselves. As long as you don't cross your bottom line, why should you care about other people's opinions? She didn't care about Yang Ziyuan. Lin Hu shouted a few more times, and she felt that the weight in her heart had been lifted quite a bit. There were still people around the lake. Ning Xuemore's shouts attracted a lot of attention. Ning Xuemore didn't care at all. She stood there with her eyes full of elegance and high spirits. Yang Ziyuan was finally moved. She stood together with Ning Xuemore and shouted at the lake. After all, she was the daughter of a noble family, so her voice was still a little soft and she didn't dare to let it out. But even so, he still felt a lot better. Ning Xuemore giggled as she encouraged her, louder. Then, she raised her voice and shouted again. Yang Ziyuan took a deep breath and finally threw away her scruples and shouted at the lake. Once they shouted the first time, the more they shouted, the more excited they became. The more they shouted, the happier they felt. Yang Ziyuan obviously had something on her mind. After shouting, her eyes lit up. What are you doing? A voice abruptly cut in. Yang Ziyuan's body stiffened. Her shout got stuck in her throat, and she slowly turned around. She pursed her lips. Master. Ning Xuemore also turned around to take a look and frowned slightly. There were two people standing outside the pavilion, a man and a woman. The man looked to be in his 20s. He was handsome and had an elegant temperament. He wore a lake blue robe. At this moment, his dark eyes fell on Yang Ziyuan. His brows were slightly furrowed. It was obvious that he disapproved of her shouting. The woman was also around 16 or 17 years old. She had an elegant appearance and an elegant temperament. Her whole body was filled with a strong scholarly aura. She was holding a zither in her arms. When she saw Yang Ziyuan turn around, she bowed slightly. Little sister Yuan. Yang Ziyuan, who had always been enthusiastic, had a cold face. She said in a domineering manner, "Who is your little sister? Don't randomly claim to be relatives." The woman bowed her head slightly. "Yes, Miss Ziyuan." The man's eyes darkened and his handsome face sank. Yang Ziyuan raised her head and looked at him. "What about me? Did I say something wrong? My father only has one biological daughter. She is just an adopted daughter. What qualifications does she have to call me little sister?" The man glanced at her and said coldly, "Yang Ziyuan, you are too much." Yang Ziyuan's face turned red. "You don't need to care if I'm too much or not. You don't need to interfere in the matter between me and her. You are just my zither player. Do you really want to lecture me?" Chapter 458. The man's expression also became cold. "You, unreasonable. Rong Yang, let's go." After taking 2 steps, he stopped. "You are a young lady. Crying like a ghost and howling like a wolf is too disgraceful." At this point, he seemed to feel that he was meddlesome. He didn't finish his words and then strode away. Yang Ziyuan was like a little rooster with high fighting spirit, but now she is like a deflated ball, slowly sitting down with the support of the pillar. Ning Xuemore has been watching with folded arms. She has already seen the general situation. She sat next to Yang Ziyuan and said indifferently, "Some things don't belong to you, so you don't have to force them." Yang Ziyuan's body stiffened and looked at her sideways. You can see it. Anyone with a little bit of observation can see it." Ning Xuemore patted her shoulder. "Your emotions are actually written on your face. If you want to cry, I'll give you a shoulder to lean on. After you cry, cheer up. Don't let people see you as a joke." Yang Ziyuan's pair of big eyes were already misty, but she tightly pursed her lips. "I won't cry. I won't cry for them." Ning Xuemore's palm pressed on her shoulder and didn't speak. Yang Ziyuan sat there blankly for a moment. In the end, she was still a 16-year-old girl, so she couldn't hide her emotions. Now that she met a confidant like Ning Xuemore, she couldn't hold back her worries anymore. Without waiting for Ning Xuemore to ask, she started to talk about her own matters. Yang Ziyuan's mother and Rong Yang's mother used to be close friends and had a very good relationship. Later, Rong Yang's father was convicted and the whole family was demoted to commoners. Rong Yang's father died of depression. The Rong family was completely defeated. They couldn't even live their lives. Rong Yang's mother took Rong Yang to Yang Mansion. When Yang Ziyuan's mother saw that her childhood friend was in trouble, she naturally didn't hesitate to entertain her. She arranged for the mother and daughter to stay in her residence and provided them with good food and drinks every day. But he didn't expect that Rong Yang's mother would bite the hand that fed her. She was not content with her family and coveted Yang Daren's status. Intentionally or unintentionally, she seduced him. Yang Daren couldn't control himself for a moment and had an affair with Rong mother. Later, their affair was discovered by Yang Ziyuan's mother. Madame Yang was betrayed by both her husband and her best friend. She felt as if she had been struck by lightning. How could she tolerate this? He had a big fight with Lord Yang and went to beat up Mother Rong. Lord Yang flew into a rage out of humiliation. He slapped Madame Yang and scolded her for being jealous. He even announced on the spot that he would take Mother Rong as his co-wife and be on equal footing with Madame Yang. Madame Yang couldn't take this lying down. She fell seriously ill and passed away after a month in bed. Even when she died, she couldn't forgive her husband and didn't see her husband for the last time. Before Madame Rong's arrival, Madame Yang and Lord Yang's relationship was very good. Lord Yang didn't even have a concubine. After Madame Yang's death, Lord Yang was full of regret. However, regret couldn't be exchanged for Madame Yang's rebirth. Guilt made him especially dote on his only daughter, Yang Ziyuan. However, Yang Ziyuan couldn't forgive her father because of her mother's death. She couldn't tolerate the culprit of her mother's death, Madame Rong. Lord Yang had no choice but to move Madame Rong and her daughter out of the mansion and buy them a house to settle down. Because Yang Ziyuan liked the Guqin, Lord Yang, in order to compensate his daughter, specially hired a famous Guqin master in Daliang City, Jiyu Xian, to be her teacher. The people of Daliang City loved musical instruments, especially the Guqin. Chapter 459. Almost everyone in the city knew how to play a song or two. Every year, there would be a Guqin competition. If one won the competition, not only would they become famous in Daliang City, their social status would also increase exponentially. Jiyu Xian was that year's champion. Not only was he good at playing the Guqin, but he was also young and handsome. He was almost the dream lover of all the girls in Daliang City. Yang Ziyuan also developed feelings for him in the process of learning the Guqin from him. Yang Ziyuan was a bold and passionate girl. She plucked up the courage to pursue him and confess to him. She did not expect that she would be rejected by Jiyu Xian on the spot. After Jiyu Xian rejected her, he probably did not want to get into trouble, so he refused to be her Guqin master and never visited her again. Yang Ziyuan was not discouraged. She continued to pursue him, sending him gifts, and fighting for every opportunity to meet him. Until one day, she saw Jiyu Xian and Rong Yang walking together. Later, she found out that Jiyu Xian and Rong Yang were childhood sweethearts. The two were friends before the Rong family fell. Yang Ziyuan was hit especially hard. It turned out that the person she liked was the childhood sweetheart of the person she hated the most. She was defeated by that woman. There was nothing more dramatic than this. Yang Ziyuan could not recover from the shock for a long time. She originally had an excellent Guqin. Jiyu Xian had chosen it for her when he was her Guqin master. She had always regarded it as a treasure. However, ever since she found out about the relationship between Jiyu Xian and Rong Yang, she wanted to smash the Guqin. But she had a fetish and could not bear to destroy her own things. In the end, she sent someone to throw the Guqin out. Out of sight, out of mind. Of course, she had also completely given up on Jiyu Xian. However, rationality was one thing, and feelings were another. She was deeply invested in this relationship. How could it be so easy to withdraw completely? Her feelings for Jiyu Xian could not be put down so easily. Fortunately, she was more rational and did not ask about Jiyu Xian's matters. She would not go to places where Jiyu Xian was present. In order to ease his daughter's anxiety and divert her attention, Lord Yang had organized several tea parties, flower parties, poetry parties. He had even arranged for her to go to the capital to watch the Celestial Master's enthronement ceremony so that she could broaden her horizons and forget about that person. Over the past year, she had made a lot of friends and had become a lot more cheerful. She even thought that she had let go of her feelings for Jiu Xian, but she did not expect that the moment she saw him for the first time today, her heart would still beat violently. Being scolded by him, her heart would still hurt. Seeing him and Rong Yang together, her heart still felt like it was about to explode. She just wanted to cry a good cry. She said she would not cry, but in front of Ning Xuemo, she still shed tears. In the end, she simply leaned on Ning Xuemo's shoulder and cried. After crying, she dejectedly said that she had signed up for this Guqin party because she heard that Jiu Xian would not be coming. She did not expect him to come, so she was ready to withdraw and pull Ning Xuemo back to her Yang mansion. Since you are ready to let go of him, why not face him bravely? Treat him like an ordinary person? Ning Xuemo could not help but sigh and pat Yang Ziyuan's shoulder. Chapter 460. Ning Xuemo said again, "Didn't you always want to be a chivalrous woman in Jianghu? Running away like this is not like you, it's not chivalrous at all. You don't owe them anything, so why are you afraid? If you just leave like this, aren't you afraid that Rong Yang will laugh at you?" The little maid was also indignant. "That's right, miss, your zither skills have improved very quickly this year. This time, you might be able to get a good ranking and surpass that Rong Yang. Do you really want to see that vixen win the championship and raise her tail to the sky?" In the end, Yang Ziyuan was a hot-blooded girl. Her fingers slightly clenched, as if touched, and she lowered her head in silence. Ning Xuemo took out a mirror from somewhere and handed it to her. "Come, look for yourself and increase your confidence. You are not worse than that woman. That person giving up on you is the biggest loss in his life." These words made Yang Ziyuan laugh, and her eyes lit up. Yes, she had to walk out of the knot in her heart in the end. Blindly running away was not her style. Not only did she want to participate in this zither recital, she also wanted to participate in it in a grand manner. Ning Xuemo and Yang Ziyuan changed into a new set of clothes, freshened up, and walked into the boat where the zither recital was held under the accompaniment of the musical attendants. It was already dark, and the people who came to participate in the zither recital had almost all arrived. The interior of the boat was decorated in an antique style. There were incense tables, auspicious beasts burning incense, and ink paintings of mountains and rivers on the screen. All of them showed one word: elegance. There were many people who came to participate in the competition, a total of 38 people. They were all experts in the zither, and most of them were young men and women. Everyone was carefully dressed. The men's clothes fluttered in the wind, and the women's skirts were slender. Playing the zither was an elegant activity, so the men and women who came to participate in the competition highlighted one word: elegance. There were no strange clothes, no bright red or purple, and mainly plain colors. Even the jewelry on the women's heads was removed, and most of them used a white jade hairpin or a green jade hairpin. Because of the plain clothes on this boat, when Yang Ziyuan and Ning Xuemo walked in, they attracted everyone's attention. If the red dress was not worn properly, it would appear gaudy. But today, Yang Ziyuan's outfit gave people an extremely breathtaking feeling. When it came to fashion sense, if Ning Xuemo claimed to be second, no one would dare to claim to be first. And today, Yang Ziyuan's outfit was completed under her command. She wore a fiery red mermaid dress that dragged on the ground, and a piece of the same color draped over her shoulders. A southern pearl the size of a cat's eye hung on her snow-white neck, glistening brightly. Her black hair wasn't tied up in a bun, but draped over her shoulders like a waterfall. There was only a flower branch strung with pearls on top of her head. Her eyebrows were slightly raised, and the corners of her eyes were slightly raised. There was a bright red dot between her eyebrows, and her red lips were full, like a red cherry blossom slightly blooming in the rain. She gently pursed her lips, and there was a soul-stirring beauty. There were all kinds of palace lanterns hanging around the hall. Under the flickering candlelight, her face was even more stunning. This red dress on her body was like a ball of bright fire. It didn't seem tacky, but had a kind of extreme elegance and nobility. Of course, it was also in line with her identity as the daughter of the city lord. There were occasional gasps in the hall, and it was unknown how many pairs of eyes fell on her body. Those eyes were filled with amazement, jealousy, and of course, disapproval. Yang Ziyuan's identity was noble, and most of the people present knew her. They came forward to greet her, and some greeted her. Chapter 461. Compared to Yang Ziyuan's high profile, Ning Xuemo's attire was very ordinary. She only wore a dress that did not show off her figure. Her makeup was neither ugly nor handsome, so standing beside Yang Ziyuan, she seemed to be overshadowed. Almost no one noticed her existence. On the other hand, Yang Ziyuan often pulled Ning Xuemo in front of her and introduced her to the others. This is Zither Master Shui, from the capital. Ziyuan's zither skills have benefited greatly from her guidance. She is Ziyuan's good teacher and helpful friend. Because of her introduction, there were a few people who looked at Ning Xuemo a few times. Ning Xuemo smiled back at them, making it difficult for people to guess her depth. Among the gazes that looked at Ning Xuemo, there were two that could not be ignored. Ning Xuemo deliberately looked back and happened to meet the eyes of the blue-robed Jiyu Xian. Jiyu Xian's gaze was somewhat complicated. It was sharp and cold, as if he was evaluating Ning Xuemo's worth. Ning Xuemo calmly looked back. Unexpectedly, she could faintly see some hostility in his eyes. Hostility? Where did this hostility come from? Ning Xuemo was actually somewhat puzzled. She knew that this genius zither master Jiyu was not participating today, but was there as a judge. Ning Xuemo could not help but sigh in her heart. No wonder Yang Ziyuan could not forget this zither master Jiyu. This person's appearance was indeed several levels higher than all the men around him. His temperament was also good, belonging to the cool type of handsome guy. When he sat on the judges' panel, everyone else became a part of the background. Who knew how many young girls' gazes secretly lingered on his body? Who knew how many young girls' gazes were on the corners of his robes? Of course, this did not include Ning Xuemo. It was not that she did not like looking at handsome guys, but with the two super handsome guys in front of her, Shui Ilan and Han Shanyu, she was already immune to other handsome guys. She did not know why, but she suddenly thought of Han Shanyu. She secretly thought that if this person were to appear here now, she was afraid that this boat would be overturned. At that time, it was unknown whether these young girls' gazes would still linger on Jiyu Xian. Although Yang Ziyuan was also a participant, her status was still there, so her seat was a good position, close to the judges' panel. She did not know whether the person who arranged the seating arrangement did it intentionally or not, but her seat was right next to Rong Yang's. Rong Yang's head was slightly lowered. When she saw Yang Ziyuan coming over, her eyes flashed with hatred, but when she raised her head, her gaze became gentle. She stood up and bowed to Yang Ziyuan, Sister Yuan. She seemed to feel that it was inappropriate, so she changed her words. Miss Yang, Rong Yang is blessed. Her voice was melodious, and she had a good voice. Yang Ziyuan's gaze was cold, and she only said one sentence, give up your seat. Rong Yang's face stiffened, and the appropriate smile on her face almost disappeared. You. What did you say? Yang Ziyuan ignored her, and raised her head to look at the chief steward who arranged the seating arrangements. Move her things elsewhere, I want this place. The zither recitals held in Daliang City were all sponsored by the Yang family, so these people were very polite to the eldest daughter of the Yang family, and did not want to provoke her. Although Yang Ziyuan was usually the eldest daughter of the Yang family, she did not have a temper. No matter what the competition was, she would not oppress others because of her status, and always participated with her own ability. Even if she did not win any awards, she would not be dissatisfied, and would not embarrass others. Therefore, most people were very respectful to this eldest daughter of the Yang family. No one would have thought that she would directly embarrass Rong Yang and chase them away. Chapter 462. Everyone was stunned. Rong Yang's pretty face turned green and white. You. On the judging panel, Jiyu Xian slightly frowned. His eyes fell on Yang Ziyuan. Ziyuan, you've gone too far. His tone was the usual tone he used when talking to her, with a sense of condescension, as if he was her master. Yang Ziyuan also faintly glanced at him. Child Jiyu, whether I've gone too far or not, it's not up to you to say. This was the first time she had insulted him in front of others. This was also the first time she didn't call him master, but child Jiyu Xian was somewhat embarrassed, his handsome face faintly paled. Ziyuan, you dash child Jiyu, you and I are no longer master and disciple, it's inappropriate to call me by my name. Please call me Miss Yang. Yang Ziyuan spoke again. Such a distant attitude, such a cold tone, Jiyu Xian's fingers slightly clenched, as if he was enduring. All right, Miss Yang, Rong Yang was the third place last year, what's wrong with her sitting there? You want to drive her away? Yang Ziyuan glanced at Rong Yang. Rong Yang's head was slightly lowered, but it just so happened that people could see the hazy light in her eyes, as if there were tears in her eyes, as if she had suffered a great grievance. Yang Ziyuan's eyes flashed with a touch of anger. That year, it was this woman's mother who used this kind of weakness to seduce her father, and finally killed her mother. This really is like mother like daughter. Her daughter used this method to win the sympathy of everyone. Yang Ziyuan suppressed the anger in her heart, and coldly said, I came with my friend and master, we want to sit together. As for this Miss Rong, she was only the third place last year. There are still several previous third place winners here. There are even 2 second place winners, but I don't see them sitting in this seat. Child Jiyu arranged for her to sit here alone, isn't that a bit biased? The seat that Rong Yang was sitting on could only be occupied by a woman of Yang Ziyuan's status. With Rong Yang's status, it was indeed inappropriate for her to sit there. And Ning Xuemo appeared in the name of Yang Ziyuan's friend and master. Naturally, she would take the upper position. Therefore, Yang Ziyuan's words were not inappropriate. However, Yang Ziyuan usually didn't care too much about this. Last time, Rong Yang was sitting in this position. At that time, Yang Ziyuan felt wronged and endured it. Therefore, when Rong Yang arrived this time, he decided to sit in this seat. Although the chief steward who made the arrangements didn't think it was appropriate, he tacitly agreed to it for the sake of Jiyu Xian and Lord Yang's adopted daughter. But she didn't expect that this time Yang Ziyuan wouldn't tolerate it anymore, which made Rong Yang quite uncomfortable. In front of so many people, she didn't want to give up this seat. A pair of watery eyes looked at Jiyu Xian for help. Xian Gij. Jiyu Xian's face didn't look very good. He paused for a moment and said, Rong Yang, you change your seat. Rong Yang was stunned. Although she was unwilling in her heart, at this time, there was no other way. She could only tidy up the zither and move her seat. The chief steward who arranged the seating arrangements arranged a new seat for her. The arranged seat was not far from the rostrum. It was arranged with the other second and third place winners, so she couldn't find any other reason. Ning Xuemo seemed to be watching a good show. She didn't open her mouth, but in her heart, she felt that Yang Ziyuan was really a good child to teach. She should have been like this a long time ago. A kind person is bullied, a kind horse is ridden. When necessary, you still need to use your momentum to suppress people. Dear friends, can you guess who will come to this zither festival? Then shout at the top of your lungs about the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Chapter 463. Miss, are you a Guqin master from the capital? Are you Miss Yang's current master? Jiyu Xian suddenly turned to face Ning Xuemo and asked. She and I are like a teacher and a friend, we've only given her a few pointers. Ning Xuemo lazily replied with a smile that wasn't a smile. Miss Yang's Guqin skills are very good. Since Miss can give her pointers, your Guqin skills must be even better. I wonder if this one would be willing to exchange pointers? Ning Xuemo couldn't help but glance at him. It seems that this man's hostility towards her has deepened. He actually opened his mouth to challenge her. The crowd also looked at each other in dismay. Although Jiyu Xian's personality was cold, his temperament was modest, and he didn't have a competitive heart. How many people wanted to challenge him, but he had indifferently declined. Who would have thought that today he would actually challenge a woman like Ning Xuemo? What kind of provocation did he receive? Yang Ziyuan's eyes revealed a touch of sadness. He must be angry at her for driving Rong Yang away, so he came to find trouble with her friend. Rong Yang really is his sweetheart. For her, even his temperament has changed. Everyone had their own thoughts, but Ning Xuemo only smiled and said, this little girl also came to participate in the competition. When it's this little girl's turn, I hope that child Jiyu will not be stingy with his guidance. Having said that, Jiyu Xian couldn't say anything else. He only said one sentence, "Then I will listen to Miss Yang's high notes." The crowd looked at each other again, and finally looked at Ning Xuemo. Whether it was Ning Xuemo's appearance or dress, she was the kind that didn't attract attention. Especially her pair of small hands, which looked a bit rough and dark, not at all delicate like a master guqin player. Therefore, these people didn't believe that Ning Xuemo was a guqin master. They thought that she was a street performer that Yang Ziyuan casually pulled out to annoy Jiyu Xian. Most of the gazes that looked at her were filled with suspicion and disdain. There were even people talking in low voices behind them, voicing the suspicions in their hearts, and then laughing mockingly. Ning Xuemo's ears were sharp. She heard their mocking words, but she didn't take it to heart. She wasn't the kind of person who cared about rumors and slanders. She had always done things her own way and didn't care about what others said about her. He ate and drank as he pleased. He sat there and peeled melon seeds. The boat was quite large. It was currently sailing on the misty lake. The sound of the zither could be heard from the boat, reverberating and rippling on the surface of the lake. The guqin competition had already begun. The contestants played the guqin according to the order they had arranged beforehand. Because there was not enough time, each contestant was only allowed to play a short piece. Those who played particularly well would be allowed to play 2 short pieces. Because Ning Xuemo was added later by Yang Ziyuan, she was arranged to be the last to perform. These contestants had actually gone through several rounds of selection. To be able to participate in the last round of the competition, everyone naturally had some skills. Ning Xuemo cracked melon seeds, drank tea, and listened to the music. At first, she was still commenting on the players in her heart, or listening to the comments of the 4 judges. These 4 judges were indeed worthy of being highly respected. Every comment was on point and very authentic. Jiyu Xian's comments were very few, but every one of them was sharp and accurate, going straight to the core. His evaluation of each contestant was extremely appropriate. Ning Xuemo also had some admiration. It seemed that Jiyu Xian's reputation as a guqin genius was not undeserved. She listened to the first dozen or so contestants, and their guqin skills were not bad. Chapter 464. Compared to Ning Xuemo, these people are still lacking. She was rather impatient and turned her head to look out of the window. There were many windows on the cruise ship, and her seat was near a window. At this moment, the night breeze was blowing, and she could hear the sound of the oars moving across the water. She felt a little drowsy, and the music played by the players behind her was like a lullaby to her. Unknowingly, one of the players stopped playing. "Since Miss Shui is a master from the capital, why don't you give this servant some pointers?" "Miss Shui, Miss Shui," a soft voice sounded. Ning Xuemo was in a half-asleep state when she was suddenly pushed by someone. She finally woke up from her nap. When she looked up, she saw that Rong Yang had just stopped playing and a pair of eyes fell on her. Her tone was gentle and polite, but her eyes flashed a trace of disdain and malice. Obviously, she found out that Ning Xuemo was dozing off and deliberately wanted to embarrass Ning Xuemo. Miss Shui couldn't have fallen asleep, right? Could it be that our music is too vulgar and can't enter Miss Shui's ears? Rong Yang's voice was softer, and her words were more sarcastic. "Rong Yang." Jiyu Xian's face showed displeasure. "Xian Gij, I'm sorry, but this little sister really wants to listen to Miss Shui's comments. A master from the capital must have some unique points. If you give some pointers, this little sister will benefit a lot." This time, Rong Yang was determined to embarrass Ning Xuemo. Because she clearly saw that Ning Xuemo had already fallen asleep while she was playing the zither. Everyone's eyes fell on Ning Xuemo, waiting to see what she would say. This white lotus actually came to provoke her. Ning Xuemo couldn't help but want to laugh. She didn't want to be meddlesome today and wanted to be a good person, but in the end, her eyes turned to Rong Yang's face and smiled. "You really want me to comment?" Her voice was very gentle and kind, but Rong Yang's heart inexplicably trembled. Her intuition seemed to have provoked someone who shouldn't be provoked. But now that she had said it, she had no room to retreat. Therefore, she nodded reservedly. Please enlighten me, Miss Xue. Since you want me to comment, then Miss Rongyang must think that I am a first-rate teacher, on the same level as these 4 masters. Since Miss Rong addressed the 4 of them as great masters, you should naturally address me as such as well. There was no need to talk about young ladies anymore. If they broke the rules, they would not be asking for guidance. Don't you think so, Miss Rong? Rong Yang was speechless. Ning Xuemo's words were so sharp that Rong Yang was speechless. However, how could she be willing to call Ning Xuemo great master now? She rolled her eyes and said sweetly, Miss Xue's words are naturally reasonable, but we still haven't seen Miss Xue's true skills. Now that he addressed Miss Xue as master, it was likely that everyone present would not be convinced. Miss Xue has to rely on her true ability to convince the masses. I don't know what Miss Rong wants to see my true ability. Ning Xuemo raised an eyebrow. You want me to play a piece for you now? I remember that my piece was arranged at the end. If I play it now, it would break the rules of this zither recital. Or does Miss Rong think that you are a cut above others, that you have a childhood sweetheart as a judge, so you can change the rules at will? Rong Yang was once again blocked by Ning Xuemo's words. She opened her mouth and was about to say something, but Ji Yuxian, who was sitting at the judge's table, said lightly, the rules cannot be changed. Chapter 465. Yang Ziyuan also proudly opened her mouth. The rules are the rules, this lady does not have the right to change them, others do not. When she said this, she inadvertently glanced at Ji Yuxian. She did not expect Ji Yuxian's pair of black eyes to fall on her body, the color of his eyes faintly complicated. The 2 people's eyes met, Ji Yuxian expressionlessly looked away, Yang Ziyuan also lowered her eyes. Yang Ziyuan rarely did not give him face, after this time, he will only hate her even more, but, she can't endure anymore, not to mention she can't let her friends be wrong. Rong Yang's face changed again, even Ji Yuxian did not speak up for her, she had to change her mind and smiled, the rules really cannot be changed, this servant also did not mean that. Then, can I ask this lady to comment on the quality of the performance of the few people just now? I think they would also like to be guided by this lady. She looked at the few people who just finished playing not long ago, those people naturally nodded again and again. Ning Xuemo smiled and leisurely said, do you know that my comments are worth 1,000 gold? If you want me to comment, that's fine. Show me your sincerity. Rong Yang was startled, her face immediately showed disdain. Lady Xue, the zither is an extremely elegant thing, tainting it with the stench of money is not good, I'm afraid it will be ridiculed. The others also showed a look of agreement. How can an elegant person's activity be tainted with gold and silver? This woman is too worldly. Ning Xuemo's lips curved. Then I would like to ask Lady Rong, is painting an extremely elegant thing? Of course it is. Rong Yang answered without hesitation. Zither, chess, calligraphy and painting are originally the elegant activities of an elegant person. That painting Saint Han Shanyu is extraordinary enough, right? His paintings are hard to get even with millions of gold. When did you see him give away his paintings on the streets? This. Rong Yang choked. If this is a painting competition, you invited Master Han to come and let him give you comments one by one? Rong Yang's face turned green. Everyone looked at each other. One of them harumphed indignantly, Master Han is known to be a leading figure in the art world. How can you compare to him? Ning Xuemo's face darkened, and she sneered, you haven't heard the sound of my zither yet. How can you be sure that I'm not the leading figure in the ancient zither world? That person was tongue-tied, and he also retreated. A well-off young man surnamed Du who had just finished playing stood up and expressed that he was willing to pay 1,000 gold for Ning Xuemo's comments. Ning Xuemo leisurely smiled. All right. Originally, my comments are priceless, but since I've just arrived at your precious land, and you are all Liang's citizens, I have to give Ziyuan some face and give a few comments during this zither recital. That young Master Du was quite straightforward and immediately handed over 1,000 taels of silver. Young Master Du wanted to play another song and let Ning Xuemo comment again. Ning Xuemo waved her hand to indicate that there was no need. She immediately started to comment on the strengths and weaknesses of his zither playing, as well as the shortcomings. Her words were not much, but they were extremely incisive. Every word and sentence went straight to the point. Almost everyone present was an expert in the zither. When they first listened to her, they were somewhat disdainful. They thought that she was just deliberately mystifying, and in reality, she was just looking for a copy of the words in her sleep. But after listening to a few words, almost everyone's expression became dignified. Too incisive. Not only did she point out the small mistakes in young Master Du's zither playing, but she also pointed out how to correct them. Chapter 466. Ning Xuemor's comments were all ignored by the 4 judges. They simply didn't mention it. Ning Xuemor only gave a few comments, but young Master Du felt that he had benefited a lot. His attitude had also changed from indifference to wholeheartedly convince. When Ning Xuemor finished, he clasped his hands and bowed. Miss Xue is indeed a master of the Guqin. I have learned a lot. Thank you. No matter which profession, the strong were respected. It was the same for Guqin masters. The other Guqin masters looked at Ning Xuemor differently. They no longer looked at her with disdain, but as if they were looking at a real master. There were many rich kids present. After young Master Du, there were a few people who wanted to spend a lot of money to invite Ning Xuemor to give her comments. Ning Xuemor sat down lazily. It's getting late. Let's hurry up with the competition. For those who need my comments, I will speak up after the 4 masters. She had a kind of arrogant attitude, with the strength of a master. She was also good at acting cool. The others did not dare to say anything else. The Guqin competition continued. Among the people behind, after the judging, they spent a lot of money to invite Ning Xuemor to give her comments. Ning Xuemor's comments were just right, making everyone wholeheartedly convinced. The people who received her comments benefited a lot. Everyone looked at her with more respect and admiration. Even the 4 judges were convinced by Ning Xuemor's comments. Ning Xuemor was in the limelight. Yang Ziyuan also felt proud and elated. Her eyes were full of smiles. She was originally a bright and beautiful girl. Now that she was sitting in her seat, she attracted the attention of many young talents. Yang Ziyuan occasionally turned her head and met Jiyu Xian's eyes. His eyes were pure black and deep like a whirlpool. Yang Ziyuan's heart skipped a beat. She was the first to look away. Since they were not fated to be together, she had to learn how to let go. Jiyu Xian also lowered his eyes and took a sip of tea. The girl who used to be lively and straightforward, who used to circle around him every day, now had such a cold gaze. He suddenly felt that this tea was actually very bitter, causing his mouth to be filled with bitterness. In fact, he didn't know what he was feeling either. He clearly hated her and didn't want her to bother him. But when she really stopped pestering him, he felt a little lost. When he really couldn't see her, he actually started to miss her and even dreamed of her occasionally. Jiyu Xian didn't plan to be a judge for this Guqin recital, but when he heard that Yang Ziyuan would be participating, he unexpectedly agreed. He was the one who had resigned from his position as her teacher. He was the one who didn't want her. But why did he feel jealous when he saw that she had found a new teacher? Moreover, the teacher was a woman. His heart was filled with a bitter taste. He lifted his sleeve and coughed twice. Jiyu Xian had been feeling unwell for the past few days, but he had forced himself to sit here. Now, he still felt a little dizzy. Yang Ziyuan seemed to have heard the commotion. She glanced at him and saw his pale face. She knew that his old illness had flared up again. If it was in the past, she would have flown over like a little swallow and asked about his well-being. She even specially prepared medicine for him. Back then, she always had it on her. Even now, she still had the special medicine that she had specially prepared for him. Sometimes, habits were really a scary thing. Yang Ziyuan touched the medicine in her sleeve. Right now, it wasn't her turn to care for him. There would naturally be someone who would care for him. Chapter 467. Yang Ziyuan suppressed the bitterness in her heart. Her eyes swept over him. Sure enough, after Jiyu Xian coughed twice, Rongyang walked over and asked him a few words with concern. Her demeanor was very intimate. Jiyu Xian suddenly felt a little irritated. He just answered her with a few words, and couldn't help but glance at Yang Ziyuan. He thought she would come over. But Yang Ziyuan just turned her head to look at him, and then looked away, focusing her energy on the person playing the zither. The expression on her pretty face was still the same, slightly pursing her lips, proud like a little peacock. Xian Gij. Rong Yang's call called him back to his senses. He suddenly felt dispirited, waved his hand, indicating that he didn't mind, and let Rong Yang return to her seat. Finally, it was Yang Ziyuan's turn. The zither boy behind her brought her a zither. Jiyu Xian's eyes fell on her zither, his eyes slightly narrowed. The style of her zither and the one she used to play was very different. The one she used to play was a scorched tail zither, with black as the main theme. But now, this one was golden red, with her red dress. It was surprisingly harmonious. Yang Ziyuan originally didn't wear red in front of him, because she knew that he didn't like red and green things, and liked to wear plain clothes, so she always wore plain clothes. His occasional praise could make her pair of eyes shine brightly for a long time. The current Yang Ziyuan seemed to have completely said goodbye to her past, and restored her original nature. Her original nature was so flamboyant and passionate. Originally, she was like his little attendant. Everything revolved around him. Now, Yang Ziyuan finally radiated her original style, so youthful and compelling. Don't know how many men's eyes lingered on her body. And her eyes no longer stopped for him. He took another sip of tea, only to feel the bitterness in his mouth. Yang Ziyuan's zither skills have improved a lot compared to before. It was as smooth as flowing water, and increased a lot of spirituality. She played 2 bars before stopping. Applause rang out in the hall. It was clear that listening to her play the zither was indeed a pleasure. Maybe it was because she was feeling it, or maybe it was because she had been enlightened by a great teacher, but this time, there was a different flavor to her zither music. This flavor brought people into her melody, and their emotions couldn't help but be affected by her, fluctuating along with her zither music. As the last note of the zither fell, everyone had a feeling that it was not enough and wanted to continue listening to her play. The people present were all experts and felt that she had performed the best in this zither recital. The other 3 judges also had high praises for her performance this time and said a lot. When it was Jiyu Xian's turn to comment, he only said 2 words, very good. Yang Ziyuan pursed her red lips and lowered her eyes. Although he didn't comment much on others, it wouldn't be to this extent. It was obvious that he was being perfunctory. It seemed that he hated her to the core. Her eyes inexplicably felt a bit sore. She blinked her eyes and held back those tears. Yang Ziyuan only gave Jiyu Xian a slight nod like she did with the other judges, expressing her gratitude. Her gaze then turned to Ning Xuemo, clearly wanting to hear her comments. Naturally, Ning Xuemo gave her a few comments, pointing out some of her minor flaws. In the end, she faintly smiled. Up until now, you're the one who displayed the best performance and played the most standard. Chapter 468. This was the highest evaluation, but no one had any objections because the majority of the people also thought so. Rong Yang lowered her head to drink tea, but her fingers holding the cup were a little tight and her knuckles were a little pale. She thought that she could win the competition today. But she didn't expect Yang Ziyuan to be in the limelight. Why? She was also Lord Yang's daughter. Although she was an adopted daughter, but her mother was married to Lord Yang, wasn't she? She was also a co-wife. But now she was living like a concubine and couldn't even enter the Yang mansion's gate. Her mother thought that after Madame Yang's death, she would be able to become the mistress of the Yang mansion. But she didn't expect that Yang Ziyuan would become a big stumbling block. That girl wouldn't tolerate them no matter what. And after Lord Yang moved them to the outer residence, he didn't even visit them once a year. If it wasn't for her cleverness, trying to please her godfather, perhaps they wouldn't even have enough money to live an ordinary life and would be bullied to death by the servants in the mansion. Every time Rong Yang saw Yang Ziyuan, although she was respectful and polite, but in her heart, she couldn't wait to stab this girl and curse her to die quickly. In front of Jiyu Xian, she also intentionally or unintentionally said bad things about Yang Ziyuan, making Jiyu Xian's impression of Yang Ziyuan drop again and again. Rong Yang suppressed the hatred in her heart and softly congratulated Yang Ziyuan like everyone else. Yang Ziyuan ignored her, as if she didn't see her. Rong Yang's face looked like she was wronged and helpless, but her heart sneered. The more bad Yang Ziyuan's attitude towards her, the more people had opinions and dissatisfaction towards Yang Ziyuan. After all, among the people present, more than half were children of ordinary families. It was common to pity the poor and hate the rich. The more condescending Yang Ziyuan's attitude towards Rong Yang, the easier it was to arouse the public's disgust. Sure enough, she secretly scanned the crowd and received a lot of pity and sympathy from their eyes. She also saw that they were disappointed in Yang Ziyuan. She couldn't help but look at Jiyu Xian again. She felt that he would speak up for her or comfort her with his gaze. But, no. Jiyu Xian seemed to be distracted. He kept drinking tea, and his face was paler than usual. After that, a few more contestants bounced over, and the judges all had their own opinions. Finally, it was the last person's turn. The last person was Ning Xuemo. At this time, it was already close to midnight. Everyone was a bit sleepy, but Ning Xuemo's appearance made everyone excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. After commenting on so many people, it was finally her turn to take the stage. Many people only knew how to talk, but they did not know if this young lady really had the ability to shock the world with a single song. Ning Xuemo did not bring her own zither. After she stood up, she smiled and said, "This time I came out in a hurry, so I did not bring my zither. Who has a zither that I want to use?" Once the words came out, the audience was silent. Everyone understood that when playing the zither, one should play the zither that they were already used to, and not casually change it. Especially during the competition, one should pay more attention to this point. The zither that everyone brought this time was the one that they were most familiar with. But now, Ning Xuemo actually casually asked for a zither. Did she really not put these people in her eyes, or was her zither skills so high that she did not need to choose a zither? Rong Yang's eyes flashed slightly. She was about to ask to lend her zither to Ning Xuemo, but Jiyu Xian said lightly, "Use mine." With a wave of his hand, the zither boy behind him carried his zither to Ning Xuemo's zither. Chapter 469. The zither was wrapped in a soft silk cloth. After the silk cloth was untied, the black charred body of the zither was finally exposed. The zither is indeed a good zither, both the strings and the body are perfect. Ning Xuemo tried playing a few notes and nodded her head. This zither is good, to her liking. When Yang Ziyuan saw the zither, her face slightly changed. Is this the zither that she threw away? Look at the color and the shape, it's exactly the same. Is it a coincidence? Or is it really that zither? She did throw away the zither in a fit of pique. As for where the servant girl threw the zither, she was afraid that she would regret it, so she never asked. Now that she suddenly saw the exact same zither here, her heart felt like it was thrown into a stone, endlessly turbulent. Suppressing her heartbeat, she looked at the zither a few more times, feeling that it's even more similar. After all, this zither has been with her for a year. She is already familiar with its every texture, every string. It's impossible to be wrong. Could it be that after she threw away the zither, it was picked up by Jiyu Xian? What does he mean? Her eyes couldn't help but look at Jiyu Xian. This time Jiyu Xian and her did not have a tacit understanding. His face did not have much expression, he just coughed twice. Rong Yang naturally also recognized this zither. Her face changed. She couldn't help but say, "Xian Gij, this is not the zither you usually use." Jiyu Xian seemed to not care. What does it matter if I use it or not? Zithers are spiritual weapons. Every zither should be treasured. Are these words meant for her to hear? Yang Ziyuan slightly pursed her lips, her heart feeling complicated. Fortunately, her bad mood did not last long, because Ning Xuemo has already started to play. After a few notes, the whole hall instantly quieted down. When an expert shows his hand, it's easy to tell. Ning Xuemo only played a short piece of music, but it was enough to stun everyone in the hall. Ning Xuemo loved musical instruments. She knew a lot of musical instruments, but the one she was best at was the guqin. Perhaps it was because she had a special talent for playing the zither. In her previous life, when she learned this zither, she felt as if she had the help of God. It was as if this was an innate skill that she had picked up again. Every time she played, even her teacher would be amazed. After learning for a year, not only did she surpass her teacher, but she also couldn't find a match for her in terms of playing the guqin. If she hadn't become a special agent, perhaps she would have become a famous zither player in her previous life. The song she played this time was Moonlit Night on the Spring River. It was a famous song, but the people in this world had never heard it before. Coupled with her superb zither skills, it almost instantly brought people into the atmosphere of the zither. Along with the sound of the zither, a beautiful scene seemed to unfold before the eyes of the people on the boat. The moon was as big as a round plate, and the river water was flowing. The moonlight floated in the river, and the ripples were like fragments of silver. There were sporadic flowers blooming on the riverbank. As the river flowed, the flowers bloomed and withered in an instant. And the moon was sometimes full and sometimes waxing. The moon was waxing and waning, and the flowers bloomed and withered. Only the flowing river water remained unchanged. It was as if time flowed like water, and life had its own vicissitudes. Everyone held their breaths, afraid that if they breathed out too much, it would disturb the beautiful sound of the zither. People who dabbled in the arts were sensitive, and their emotions were easily affected by the sound of music. Those who were sensitive already had tears in their eyes, as if they were on the vast and empty riverbank, feeling the passage of time and the impermanence of life. Chapter 470. Ning Xuemore had already played more than 2 parts of the song, but no one interrupted her. Finally, the complete moonlit spring river flower night was played and the sound of the zither stopped. There was a moment of silence in the hall and then there was a thunderous applause. Almost everyone stood up and applauded Ning Xuemore with all their might. Even 3 of the 4 judges on the judging panel stood up and applauded for her. Even the strictest zither master could not find any problems with Ning Xuemore's playing. The 3 zither masters gave her a high evaluation in unison. This song can only be heard in the heavens, how many times can it be heard in the human world? Jiyu Xian also gave a sigh and said, listening to Miss Xue's song, this Jiyu feels like I learned it for nothing. Miss Xue's title of Great Zither Master is well deserved. Miss Xue is the champion of this zither competition. Ning Xuemore smiled, you flatter me. She was not interested in being the champion of the zither competition. She was interested in the prize, the crystal phoenix wood. Her gaze landed on the prize, and her eyes sparkled. That thing was finally hers. Ning Xuemore gently pushed the zither and said, I have to thank Child Jiyu for his zither. Now this zither can be returned to its owner. Jiyu Xian shook his head and lightly said, this zither is not this goose. I was just afraid of wasting a heavenly treasure, so I casually picked it up. If Miss Xue wants to return it to its owner, you might as well go find its original owner. Ning Xuemore was stunned. She was a very smart person and looked at Yang Ziyuan. Yang Ziyuan's face was a bit pale and her bright eyes dimmed. She was thinking too much. She thought that he didn't hate her, so he secretly picked up her zither. So he was just afraid of wasting a heavenly treasure. Moreover, he didn't want to keep it and just casually gave it away. Yang Ziyuan, thinking too much is an illness, you have to treat it. It's time to cut everything off. She gave a faint smile, Xue, this zither is mine. Can you return it to me? I'll give you a good one later. Ning Xuemore naturally wouldn't refuse. She happily handed the zither to her and said, you don't have to give it to me anymore. I'm also on a journey, so it's inconvenient to bring this along. Yang Ziyuan took the zither and casually played it with her fingertips. A series of ding-ding-dong-dong-dong sounds were heard. Her expression was a little strange, as if she cherished it, but also as if she was indifferent. Jiyu Xian glanced at her, a hint of a smile on his lips. She still cherishes this zither, doesn't she? He remembered that she loved this zither as if it was a treasure. No matter where she went, she would carry it herself and not allow anyone to touch it, not even the zither boy. Except for him, of course, he had chosen this guqin for her. Since she cherished it so much, he naturally knew what she meant. At that time, he had only felt annoyed, but now, suddenly, several clanging sounds were heard. Yang Ziyuan's hands suddenly 7 strings snapped at the same time. Countless people looked over. His eyes were filled with surprise and confusion. Although this zither wasn't a peerless zither, its quality and workmanship were top-notch, so it was worth a lot. They didn't expect that Yang Ziyuan would casually break the strings. Jiyu Xian's smile froze on his lips. His fingers suddenly clenched. Ziyuan. Yang Ziyuan didn't even look at him. She struck the zither with her palm again. The zither instantly broke into 2 pieces. It was completely destroyed. She looked at the ashen-faced Jiyu Xian and smiled calmly. This zither is flawed. I've wanted to destroy it for a long time. Now I just have time. Jiyu Xian's face was pale. His hands clenched and loosened and clenched again. But he couldn't say anything else. Chapter 471. Rong Yang sighed. So this zither belongs to Miss Yang. Brother Xian said that the zither is a sacred object that touches the soul. No matter what kind of zither it is, he will treat it well. There are many zithers in his zither room. Among them, there is no lack of zithers that he picked up from various places. There is even a broken zither full of cracks. Our Yang takes care of these zithers for him every day, so she knows them the best. Who told Brother Xian to be a zither fanatic? She had a helpless expression on her face, but every word and sentence was full of a sense of possessiveness, letting people know that her relationship with Jiyu Xian is really close. Everyone originally thought that Jiyu Xian picked up Yang Ziyuan's zither. Perhaps there was some ambiguity between the two, and Jiyu Xian treated Yang Ziyuan differently. But after Rong Yang's explanation, everyone immediately felt that Jiyu Xian picked up the zither purely because he loves it. It has nothing to do with the person who threw it away. Jiyu Xian glanced at Rong Yang and slightly frowned. It seems that he wanted to say something, but in the end, he held back. His eyes glanced at Yang Ziyuan. Although Rong Yang's complexion was a little pale, the corners of her mouth still held a trace of a smile. After Rong Yang finished speaking, her face became even more indifferent. Your brother Xian is a refined scholar, but I am a vulgar person. I like to do things that burn the zither and cook the crane. After saying that, she sat back down on her seat. The maid behind her poured a cup of tea for her. She took a sip and praised. Good tea. Her set of movements was smooth as flowing water, as if there was no one around. But the fingers holding the teacup faintly trembled, and the tea spilled a little. The atmosphere was a little subtle for a moment. The organizer of the zither recital stood up to smooth things over and changed the topic. This zither recital has been successfully concluded. This time, the winner is Miss Xue Xue. He said a few congratulatory words, and finally he held up the plate containing the phoenix crystal wood. This phoenix crystal wood is yours. A smile appeared on Ning Xuemo's face. She was just about to take it when suddenly there was a zheng sound of a zither from outside. The sound was like splitting silk. This voice was like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. Almost everyone trembled. The person in charge of the Guqin recital trembled especially hard. His hand shook and the plate fell to the ground. The phoenix crystal wood on the plate fell to the ground and shattered into 17 or 18 pieces. My crystal phoenix wood. Ning Xuemo looked at the crystal phoenix wood on the ground, almost unable to cry even if she wanted to. This thing was like an egg. It was most effective when it was whole, but once it was broken, it would be like an egg with the yolk and white flowing away, leaving only the eggshell behind. It was useless. At this moment, the sound of a zither could be heard outside. Ding ding dong dong, string after string of notes flowed out and reverberated on the surface of the lake. The zither player's skills were naturally brilliant. With just a few notes, it had an extremely shocking effect, stunning all the zither players on the ship. An expert. A peerless master. An unprecedented master of the Guqin. Everyone's face was filled with a passion for art. They all rushed to the window and looked in the direction of the sound. Then, all of them seemed to be frozen in place. Under the moonlight on the surface of the water, a small boat slowly sailed over. A man in red sat cross-legged at the bow of the boat. On his lap was a deep blue zither that was like the canopy of the sky. Under the moonlight, It was overflowing with brilliant colors. The small boat rippled. The full moon above his head was like a silver moon. The deep blue sky automatically became a backdrop behind him. His red clothes were winding and fluttering behind him. His black hair was soft and smooth, draping over his shoulders. His facial features were elegant and peerless. When he smiled slightly, it was as if the flowers between heaven and earth had bloomed. Chapter 472. Moonlight, boat, red clothes, black hair. Poetic and picturesque. All of this was like a beautiful dream, and everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths. They were afraid that if they let out a long breath, they would be able to scatter this dream and blow the beauty away. Ning Xuemore originally wanted to see which Avildor had frightened her phoenix crystal wood, but the moment she saw the man's face, she also held her breath and couldn't help but take a step back. The red-clothed Avildor, Xue Ilan. This guy actually appeared here. This was really a small world for enemies. What did he come here for? Was it a coincidence or did he have a motive? This continent was so big, and there were so many people, so why did she have to meet this guy again and again? What kind of ill-fated fate was this? Ning Xuemore was speechless and asked the heavens. She took a step back, then another step back. She quietly left the window and hid behind the crowd. Hopefully, this guy was just passing by and wouldn't come to this boat. Her heart was beating wildly, and her palms were covered in cold sweat. She had once schemed against this guy in Monster Lake. With this person's vengeful nature, once he caught her, she was afraid that her little life would be over. The sound of the zither continued outside, and the song Ning Xuemore played just now was Moonlit Night of Spring River. Ning Xuemore's playing could already be considered to be at the peak of perfection, and Xue Ilan's playing could be called the sound of nature. It was not something a human could play. Everyone was intoxicated listening to it. Not only the people on this boat, even the nearby boats and fishing boats all stopped moving. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Only the faint sound of the zither could be heard on the surface of the lake. Ethereal, mysterious, like smoke enveloping the cold sand, like the moon covering the mountains and rivers. Everyone felt that after listening to his zither, their elegant and high-end playing just now was like playing cotton. It was unbearable to the ears. The sound of the zither was wonderful, and the person playing the zither was even more wonderful. He was so handsome that he didn't seem to belong to this world. Not to mention the women present, even the young men's hearts were shaken, and they almost forgot what day it was. Ning Xuemore stood there looking down. She was not mesmerized by the sound of the zither. There was only one thought in her mind. Let's go. Let's go. Heavens, this guy is just passing by, let him scram. Stop acting coquettish here. But this time, the heavens clearly did not hear her prayer, because the sound of the zither continued to linger in the vicinity, neither far nor near. Obviously, it had no intention of leaving. The sound of the zither finally stopped. The sky was dark blue, and the lake was blue. A thin layer of fog rose from the lake, covering half of the lake's surface. It also made the people on the boat faintly discernible. It almost made people think that the person would dissipate with the fog. Brother. No, Great Master, may I invite you onto the ship for a chat? The most respected musician judge on Ning Xuemore's ship actually opened his mouth to invite him. Ning Xuemore was shocked. Was this guy someone they could provoke? Was this musician trying to get himself into trouble? Would that Avildor agree? Ning Xuemore's breathing had already stopped. Since you've invited me, I dare not refuse. Xue Ilan's reply came from outside with a smile. His voice was slightly hoarse, as if it contained a hint of water vapor. It was exceptionally magnetic and pleasant to the ears. He had actually agreed. The people on the boat were in an uproar, especially the women. Their eyes shone brightly as they watched the red-robed man slowly stand up from the boat. There was no one to paddle his boat, but it moved through the water and slowly moved towards the big ship. Chapter 473. The women began to dress up, tidying their hair and tidying their clothes. Some of them even quickly took out mirrors from their sleeves and secretly looked at themselves. They all wanted to show their best side to this man and not leave any flaws. Ning Xuemore quietly retreated to the back cabin door. She wanted to leave before Shui Ilan boarded the ship. Her disguise might be able to fool the people here, but it definitely could not fool that guy's eyes. Because that guy was not human at all. Very good, because this place was located in the south and the weather was quite hot, the front and back cabin doors and windows were all open. Now, everyone's attention was on the man in red who had not yet boarded the ship, so no one noticed Ning Xuemore. Even Yang Ziyuan did not notice her. Ning Xuemore was very fast. She quietly exited the back cabin door. She had to leave before that Ivildor noticed her. This Ivildor's Guqin skills were quite good. Perhaps he only boarded the ship to learn from others and might not harm the people here. As long as these people did not covet his Guqin, it should be fine. But she could not do that. She had a grudge against him. Once they met, she would be finished. So she had to leave early on her own. Even Yang Ziyuan did not have time to inform her in advance. Because once she did, Yang Ziyuan would definitely ask countless questions. It would also alarm the others, and then there would be many more variables. She was afraid that she would make a noise and alert the Ivildor, so she did not choose to jump into the water. Instead, she grabbed the rope beside her and slowly slid down. She entered the water very softly and did not make any noise. She only created a ripple on the surface of the water. To be safe, she did not dare to stay on the surface of the water. Once she entered the water, she directly dived to the bottom. She had to dive for more than 10 meters first. Just as she dived half a meter into the water around her suddenly rippled. It was as if something had closed in and directly enveloped her. When Ning Xuemore saw it clearly, she realized that she had actually entered a big net that was the same color as the ripples. She was shocked, and a bad feeling rose in her heart. She subconsciously tried to tear the big net in front of her, but she didn't know what the big net was made of. It was very strong, and she couldn't tear it open even after using all her mental strength. What was worse was that she was very familiar with the feel of the net, as if she had touched it before. Because it was night time, the light underwater was even dimmer. Ning Xuemore couldn't see the color of the net even if she tried her best. She tried several ways to get rid of the net, but to no avail. After touching the net a few more times, the familiar feeling became even stronger. Even after using her knife to hack at the net, she still couldn't damage it in the slightest. Finally, Ning Xuemore remembered the origin of the net. This was clearly the mechanism that she had used to trap that red-clothed Ivildor. At that time, she felt that the big net was stained with the red-clothed Ivildor's blood, so she casually threw it into the monster lake. Who would have thought that he would appear here again? Needless to say, it was the red-clothed Ivildor who had placed the net here. That bastard knew she was on the boat. He also knew that she was going to escape, so he had placed the net here in advance to wait for her. This mechanism was not something that could be destroyed by human strength. In order to get rid of the net, she had to go up again. Although she knew that going up would not be a good thing, Ning Xuemore had no other choice at this time. If she didn't go up, she could only suffocate to death here. If she went up, she might still have a chance to survive. Her hands and feet moved in the water, dragging the big net upstream. Chapter 474. Unexpectedly, just as her head was about to touch the surface of the water, the net around her suddenly tightened again. She was stuck there, unable to go up or down. Ning Xuemore tried several methods, but she was unable to get out of this situation. The surface of the water was only a few inches away from her, but she couldn't go up or breathe. She had already held her breath for a long time. Her chest felt like it was going to explode, and her head was buzzing from the lack of oxygen. Her heart turned cold. She had already experienced the feeling of holding her breath in the water once. She never thought that she would experience this feeling again a few days later. Although she had suffered that time and almost drowned, she still managed to escape in the end. What about this time? That red-clothed Ivildor was clearly taking revenge on her. With his personality, would he let her go so easily? Ning Xuemore desperately raised her head. From where she was, She could see the deep blue sky and the bright stars. Freedom was so close, air was so close, but she was only one step away from life. There seemed to be some movement on the boat as a group of people came out. The leader was the red-clothed Ivildor, Shwe Elan. He stood at the stern of the boat, leaning against the railing as he looked down. His eyes sparkled under the starlight as he stared at Ning Shuemor, who was trying her best to look up. Separated by a thin layer of the lake, his eyes met hers. When their eyes met, Ning Shuemor clenched her teeth. Shwe Elan looked down at her, who was on the verge of death. The corner of his lips curved into a gentle and elegant smile. The people behind him also looked down and naturally saw Ning Shuemor struggling to get out of the water. Someone screamed, "Miss Ning Shuemor has fallen into the water." Shwe shwe. Yang Ziyuan suddenly rushed out from the crowd. "Someone, quickly save her." Splash. Splash. Two boatmen jumped into the water and swam towards Ning Shuemor, trying to get her out. Ning Shuemor stared at Shwe Elan, who was standing at the end of the boat. She felt that this Ivildor wouldn't let anyone save her so easily. He still wanted to toy with her. The two boatmen quickly swam to Ning Shuemor's side, only to discover that she was wrapped in an almost transparent net. No wonder she couldn't get up. Without another word, the two men stretched out their hands to pull at the big net. They wanted to tear the big net apart or pull her up with the net. Unexpectedly, the net seemed to be fixed in place, and they couldn't move it at all. Because of the commotion caused by their actions, Ning Shuemor, who was trapped in the net, swayed twice in the water. This movement caused the last bit of air in her mouth to be exhausted. She knew that at this time, even if she suffocated to death, she couldn't breathe. Otherwise, if she choked on the water, she would really be finished. Her face was still red at first, but then it slowly turned white and green. She bit her lips so hard that her lips were bleeding, but she did not feel any pain. His vision was getting darker and darker, and his head was getting dizzier and dizzier. His forehead was twitching as if something was about to pop out. The two boatmen naturally saw that her situation was critical. One of them steeled his heart and said, "Miss Shwe, sorry for the offense." He raised his head to take a deep breath and plunged into the water. His lips moved towards Ning Shuemor's lips, wanting to give her some air to slow her down. But before his lips could touch Ning Shuemor's lips, his body in the water suddenly trembled, as if he had been attacked by something. His face turned white, and his body tilted. He died on the spot and slowly sank into the water. Chapter 475. The other person was shocked and subconsciously reached out to grab his comrade. However, just as his fingers touched his comrade's clothes, his expression changed. With a groan, his body tilted and sank into the water. Because they were high above the water, the people on the boat could not see what happened in the water. They only saw the two people sinking into the water. Yang Ziyuan was worried about Ning Shuemor's safety and immediately sent two people who were good at swimming. Ning Shuemor's heart turned cold. She naturally knew that the deaths of the two boatmen were related to Shwe Elan. They were most likely plotted against by him. As long as that bastard was standing there, no matter how many people were sent, it would be useless. They would lose a few more lives for no reason. Although she knew it clearly, she could not open her mouth to warn the people on the boat because she had been underwater. She tried her best to widen her eyes and stared at Shwe Elan. If looks could kill, Shwe Elan would have been dismembered by her several times. Shwe Elan had been standing there with his hand on the railing. His posture was elegant and he looked like a demon. The smile on his lips was overflowing as he coldly watched Ning Shuemor struggle on the brink of death. Because of the lack of oxygen, Ning Shuemor's head became more and more bloated. In the end, it felt like it was going to explode. The psychokinesis in her body was also rushing around in her body, causing her tendons and meridians to hurt as if they were being torn apart. She subconsciously adjusted her breathing and adjusted her chaotic meridians. She did not know what was going on. When she adjusted her breathing and adjusted the airflow in her body, her forehead suddenly jumped again. It was as if a small mouth was slowly opening there. There was clearly no water coming out of her forehead, but that small mouth seemed to be able to decompose the oxygen in the water. After a moment, She actually did not feel suffocated anymore. What was going on? Could it be that there was really an additional small mouth on her forehead? Wasn't that like Erlangchen? However, Erlangchen's forehead opened the heaven's eye, while hers opened the heaven's mouth. She almost wanted to raise her hand to touch it, but just as she was distracted, she felt that the little mouth on her forehead that could breathe underwater wanted to close. This was already her only hope. She immediately focused her mind and once again circulated her energy. She finally managed to get the little mouth to breathe again. Shwe Ilan leaned on the railing and looked at her. She was still glaring at him earlier, but now she had her eyes closed. She pursed her lips slightly and floated in the water. Her long hair was spread out behind her as she floated in the water. She looked extremely fragile. Could she have drowned? He didn't even see her choking on the water. He looked at Ning Xuemore carefully again. His eyesight was naturally amazing, so he could clearly see her entire condition. Her chest did not rise and fall at all. Oh no. Was he really dead? Shwe Ilan's figure rose and floated down like a red cloud. With a wave of his sleeve, he waved away the two boatmen who had just swum over and were about to rescue them. He floated on the water like an immortal. His shoes and socks were not wet. Everyone on the boat gasped softly. Not to mention anything else, just this Ching Gong alone was enough to shock the world. Some of the girls actually forgot that Ning Xuemore was still underwater and shouted out good. Shwe Ilan's sleeves fluttered in the wind. He lowered his eyes to look at Ning Xuemore, who was underwater. This little girl was too crafty. Even someone like him had been plotted against by her several times, so he had no choice but to guard against her. Her beautiful face turned green and white as she floated there motionlessly. At this time, she couldn't possibly do anything, right? Everything was clear at a glance, wasn't it? Chapter 476. Shwe Ilan's eyes faintly flickered. Finally, he raised his hand and made a grabbing motion towards the surface of the water. He didn't know which mechanism he had triggered, but the net that had been fixed under the surface of the water brought Ning Xuemore out of the water. He stretched out his arms and caught Ning Xuemore with the net in his arms. The body of the beauty in his arms was slightly cold, but her eyes were still closed. Although she was already out of the water, she still wasn't breathing. Little girl, how does it feel to be in the net? Is it enough to make you happy? Don't die. His bright red lips moved closer to Ning Xuemore's ear and whispered. His warm breath lingered in her ear. That scene was indescribably lingering. The people on the boat were already very surprised to see him go into the water to save someone. Then they saw the otherworldly man holding the wet Ning Xuemore in his arms. His posture was very intimate, as if he was holding his first love. Most of the women on the boat suddenly felt that if the one who fell into the water was them, then it would be good. If they could be tenderly hugged by this person, then even if they died, it would be worth it. They originally thought that this was the best that the red-clothed man could do for Ning Xuemore, but they didn't expect that there would be something even more shocking. The red-clothed man said something in Ning Xuemore's ear. Then he slowly lowered his head and kissed Ning Xuemore's lips. Everyone's jaws dropped. Because Ning Xuemore had put on makeup before, her face didn't look ugly or handsome. Other than her astonishing zither skills, the others didn't feel that there was anything special about her. Men were basically visual creatures, and they appreciated beautiful women the most. Therefore, although they admired Ning Xuemore's zither skills, they didn't have any romantic thoughts towards her. The women on the boat also didn't treat Ning Xuemore as a love rival or competitor. No one would have thought that this red-clothed zither master, who seemed to have a good temper and didn't put anyone in his eyes, would take pity on Ning Xuemore. Not only did he personally save her, he also kissed her. This world was a fantasy. The women were indignant and felt that this zither master Shwe's luck was too good. Rong Yang was the most unconvinced. Among the women present, other than Yang Ziyuan, she was the prettiest. She was also a top-notch character. No matter where she went, she would become the focus of men's eyes. Although she already had Jiyu Xian in her heart, her competitive nature made her want to show off her charm in front of beautiful men to prove her extraordinariness. Therefore, when Shwe Ilan had just boarded the ship, She deliberately squeezed in front of the crowd and spoke a few words to Shui Ilan. Her voice had always been pleasant to listen to, and her posture was gentle and beautiful. Most men would find it difficult to resist her charm. Even if they weren't charmed by her, they would still greet her politely and warmly. But at that time, she had said so much to the red-clothed man, but the red-clothed man had no intention of paying attention to her. She had gotten herself into a tight spot. Although there was a hint of a spring breeze smile on his lips, the expression in his eyes was indifferent. He didn't put her, a talented woman, in his eyes. To be exact, he didn't put anyone here in his eyes. After he sat down surrounded by the crowd, he directly asked for the top 7 list of the zither recital. When he casually said that he wanted to know the first place, everyone discovered that Ning Xuemore had disappeared. While everyone was looking for Ning Xuemore in the cabin, Rong Yang came forward and intentionally or unintentionally introduced herself, saying that she was the 3rd place on the list. Chapter 477. While everyone was looking for Ning Xuemore in the cabin, Rong Yang stepped forward and intentionally or unintentionally introduced herself, saying that she was the 3rd on the list and so on. It was this remark that made the red-clothed man look at her, and then he smiled. His smile was too beautiful, too soul-stirring. 2.5 of her soul flew away from her when she saw his smile. She almost couldn't find her bearings. Just as she was about to say a few more words to leave a good impression on this man, everyone heard some movement at the stern of the boat. Then the red-clothed man stood up and chuckled. The 1st place Shui girl didn't fall into the water, did she? Then he took the lead and walked out of the cabin to the stern. Then, the following scenes happened. The red-clothed man breathed for Ning Xuemore, shocking everyone on the boat. One after another, the sound of inhaling was endless. Rong Yang couldn't help but sneer and explain, "This master is so kind, actually willing to breathe for such a woman." Presumably, no matter who fell into the water and fainted, the master would do the same. Her tone was obviously sour. Yang Ziyuan originally didn't want to pay attention to her, but hearing her say that about her friend, she immediately became angry. "Rong Yang, what nonsense are you talking about? What kind of woman is this? Shui is a woman's husband, how can someone like you casually praise her?" Yang Ziyuan's appearance was originally cold and elegant, but at this moment her pretty face was taut, and under her anger, her momentum was not small. Rong Yang's heart was cold, but she didn't dare to refute. She could only look at Jiyu Xian for help. Jiyu Xian stood there expressionlessly, looking at Yang Ziyuan. His eyes were somewhat deep. He didn't have the intention to help Rong Yang. Yang Ziyuan's mind was completely focused on Ning Xuemore below. After reprimanding Rong Yang, she held the railing and looked down, her face anxious. She was about to call the red-clothed man to rescue Ning Xuemore, but she didn't expect that the red-clothed man who was kissing her, as if he was pricked by a needle, suddenly raised his head, and blood seemed to be dripping from his lips. At this moment, Ning Xuemore, who was motionless in his arms, suddenly moved. She raised her sleeves, and several blue flying needles shot towards the red-clothed man's chest. No one expected this sudden change. Several people cried out in alarm. The red-clothed man chuckled. With a wave of his sleeve, the flying needles immediately disappeared. But Ning Xuemore was obviously not finished. At the same time she launched the poison needles, her 2 palms to hit the red-clothed man's chest. Her legs were not idle. With a fierce kick, her knees directly hit the red-clothed man's crotch. Her sudden attack was a perfect example of 3 words: fast, accurate, ruthless. In the blink of an eye, she had already unleashed 3 deadly moves. She was fast, but the red-clothed man was faster than her. Before the crowd could cry out in alarm, the red-clothed man had already made his move, but no one saw how he did it. The crowd didn't even see how he made his move, but with just a few moves, he blocked all 3 of Ning Xuemore's killer moves. With a raise of his hand, he resolved the danger. "Little Xuemore, you're really naughty," the red-clothed man said with a smile. His arms circled around her, and he held her tightly. Ning Xuemore's hands and feet were restrained by him, so she couldn't break free. Seeing his handsome face in front of her, she steeled her heart and head-butted him. She practiced internal strength, And although she didn't practice the iron head art, her head was much harder than ordinary people, so the power of this headbutt was not small. There's more at noon. Chapter 478. She had practiced inner strength before. Although she had never practiced the iron head technique, her head was still much harder than an ordinary person's. The force of this collision was not small. If the red-clothed man were to be hit by her, his handsome face would be smashed into mush. Her attack was aimed directly at his nose. Damn it, even if she couldn't kill him, she wanted to break his nose and make him jump in pain. The man in red did not seem to be able to dodge. He only had time to lower his head slightly and move his nose away. Bang! Ning Xuemo's forehead hit his forehead. Ning Xuemo's mind was suddenly in a daze. She saw stars and stars dancing in front of her eyes. She couldn't see anything clearly. Little Xuemo, I know you want to be intimate with me, but you are too impatient. Look, you hit yourself, right? Ah, there's a bump. Shuer Ilan's voice was steady, and there was a hint of concern in it. As he spoke, he even reached out a hand to rub Ning Xuemo's forehead. His voice was filled with pity. Ning Xuemo was speechless. Was this guy's forehead made of iron? She had clearly hit him with a lot of force, and the effect of the force was mutual. Even someone like her who had practiced martial arts would feel dizzy from hitting herself, but this guy didn't have any problem at all. She had hit him so hard that it was as if she had hit a piece of wood. His tone was gentle, but the strength of his fingers was not the same. His fingertips were rubbing the bump on Ning Xuemo's forehead, causing her great pain. It also finally cleared her head from the dizziness of the impact. She shook her head fiercely and shook off his mischievous fingers. She glared at him fiercely. What do you want? Shuer Ilan looked at her gently and sighed softly. Little Xuemo, every time we meet, you want to hit or kill me. It makes me very sad. Sad your sister. Ning Xuemo cursed in her heart. She struggled for a moment, but Shuer Ilan tightened his grip on her body, making it impossible for her to move an inch. He also made it hard for her to breathe. Let go of me. She gritted her teeth. Shuer Ilan shook his head seriously. That won't do. You're a little loach. If I let go of you, you'll run away again. As he spoke, his palm started to touch Ning Xuemo's body. Ning Xuemo's expression changed. Was this bastard trying to molest her in front of so many people? Hey, what are you doing? Stop. She gritted her teeth, but there was nothing she could do. Shuer Ilan smiled. Under the starlight, his smile was as resplendent as the moon, but the words he said were infuriating. Don't worry, I've touched it once, so I'll naturally stop. His hand reached into her chest. Even though Ning Xuemo's skin was thick, at this moment, her face was flushed red. She usually looked carefree and didn't care much about etiquette, but she was still a virgin. After being touched by him so unscrupulously, she wanted to bite this bastard to death. Bastard! Take your dirty hands away. If you do this again, I'll bite my tongue and commit suicide. Anyway, she wouldn't be able to get away with it if she fell into his hands, so she might as well die. Shuer Ilan's hand reached out from her chest, but he didn't really molest her. When he withdrew his fingers, there was a bag of needles between his fingertips. He said slowly, "Don't think too much. I just want to pull out the poisonous thorns of a little hedgehog like you." While he was speaking, his fingers had already nimbly touched every part of Ning Xuemo's body. From her body, he found 3 packs of poisonous needles, a bottle of poisonous sand, 10 packs of poisonous powder, and a pile of other things. Chapter 479. Ning Xuemo glared at him angrily. This bastard actually took all of her belongings. He didn't even let go of her banknotes. She clearly kept a lot of her things very well, very secretive. Shuer Ilan looked at the bottles and jars that he took out and sighed. So many poisonous things. Little Xuemo, aren't you afraid that you'll accidentally poison yourself? Ning Xuemo angrily said, "It has nothing to do with you." In fact, although she had a lot of poisonous things on her body, she had stored them very well, so there would never be a situation where she would be poisoned. How can it have nothing to do with me? You're my person. If you poison yourself or kill yourself, my heart will ache. Shui Ilan's eyes were watery and full of affection. Ning Xuemore was speechless. When did she become his person? Also, what did this bastard say about his heart aching? He was clearly the one who almost drowned her. If it wasn't for the heaven's mouth on her forehead. Wait, was the heaven's mouth on her forehead still there? Ning Xuemore almost wanted to reach out and touch it. Shui Ilan seemed to have read her mind and sighed faintly. In order to save you, I didn't care about how dirty your body was and gave you some air. However, you bit the hand that fed you and hurt my lips. There was even a hint of grievance in his voice. Ning Xuemore was shocked by him and trembled. She stared at Shui Ilan's lips. She had indeed bitten him when he wasn't paying attention just now. There were still drops of blood on this guy's lips. Strange, she had clearly smeared some kind of poison on her teeth. She had taken the antidote beforehand, so she wasn't poisoned. How come this bastard wasn't poisoned either? Shui Ilan was a considerate person. He immediately understood the confusion in Ning Xuemore's eyes and kindly explained to her, "Little Xuemore, I'm the poison ancestor, I'm immune to all poisons." So that's how it is. Ning Xuemore's mind was spinning rapidly. This bastard looked like he was smiling and had a good temper, but he was actually a pervert. Now that she was in his hands, she didn't know how he would torture her. How could she escape? His kung fu was not as good as his, he could not poison him, and he could not bind him with an oath. If she had the chance in the future, she would have to find a way to make this bastard swear an oath in the name of the demon ancestor so that he would not be passive. Shui Ilan didn't feel tired at all as he hugged her and chatted with her on the surface of the water. She was still dragging that big net on her body. Seeing her pretty face turn pink and white from anger, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He couldn't help but raise his hand to pinch her cheek. "Little Xuemore, I haven't seen you for a long time. You've grown up a lot." It was becoming more and more tender. "I almost couldn't recognize you." His fingers were gentle, but Ning Xuemore had goosebumps all over her body. She was afraid that he would tear her face off on a whim. Shui Ilan probably felt Ning Xuemore's tense body. He looked at her and asked, "Are you afraid of me? I really want to slap you to death." Ning Xuemore complained in her heart, but she didn't say anything. "You really are afraid of me?" "Sigh, actually, you don't have to be afraid of me. I love you so much." Love her? Damn, he always made her love him, right? Ning Xuemore almost wanted to laugh at his face. "Do you hate me? Do you want to bite me to death? Do you want to take revenge on me completely?" Shui Ilan looked into her eyes and asked. Was there a need to ask? If she had the ability to do so, she would have kicked this bastard into the 18th level of hell. "Actually, I have an excellent way for you to take revenge on me. Do you want to hear it?" Shui Ilan smiled lightly. Chapter 480. Was there something wrong with his head? How could he think of a way for others to take revenge on him? His idea was most likely a wicked one, or he was just teasing her. Ning Xuemore closed her eyes. "If you don't say anything, I'll take it as a yes. My idea is for you to marry me." Shui Ilan said something shocking. Ning Xuemore finally opened her eyes. She looked as though she was looking at a crazy person. "You can only stay by my side if you marry me. When you're angry, you can hit me with your little fists. When you're unhappy, you can plot against me when I'm asleep. Or you can just show me your charm and make me die of exhaustion in bed. If you really hate me to death, you can also spend all my money and make me a penniless pauper. Let me starve and cold on the streets. But I have always been a person who dotes on the person beside me. If you are a little disrespectful to me, I will not bicker with you. I will pamper you, spoil you, and let you live like a queen. You see, isn't it better for you to take revenge on me by marrying me?" This set of theories was simply overturning one's worldview. Ning Xuemore was defeated by him. She gritted her teeth and finally said, "Are you a masochist who likes to be abused? I'm sorry, but I don't have such a perverted hobby. I don't want to cooperate with you either. I only beg you to let me go and treat me as a stranger." We'll go our separate ways and don't provoke each other, okay? Her words were more modern words. Fortunately, Shwe Ilan was smart. He followed the meaning of her words and understood the gist of it. His eyelashes curved slightly. No, okay. I think I like you quite a lot. I don't want to go our separate ways. He pointed at her red lips. I'll make you marry me willingly and be my concubine. Ning Xuemor. She was indeed destined to be a concubine. Both of them wanted her to be a concubine. That's what you said. You have to make me do it willingly and not force me. Ning Xuemor immediately seized the opportunity in his words. Yes, I did say that. Shwe Ilan smiled, but there was a hint of malice in his smile. However, my words can usually be discounted. Whether they count or not is up to me. Ning Xuemor. Talking to this pervert was exhausting. She took a deep breath. Since you want me to be willing, you have to show me some sincerity and treat me better. That way, I might be moved by you. First, take this net away. It's making my stomach hurt. Shwe Ilan laughed. That won't do. You're too slippery. I'll be more at ease with this net covering you. Didn't you say you were going to treat me well? You can't even fulfill such a small request. Ning Xuemor provoked him. If you agree to my proposal and become my concubine, I'll naturally treat you well. Shwe Ilan looked at her with a smile. Why don't you agree now? Agree, my ass. Only a ghost would be his concubine. Besides, this guy didn't mean what he said. She was afraid that if she agreed, he would do whatever he wanted to do to her. He might even make fun of her. This kind of person had a characteristic. The more he couldn't get something, the more he would desperately pursue it. Once he got it, he would put it to the back of his mind. Perhaps he would find it no longer challenging and kill her directly. If she didn't agree, she might be able to live longer. Once she agreed, her life would come to an end. Chapter 481. If she didn't agree, she might be able to live a little longer. Once she agreed, her little life would come to an end. Therefore, Ning Xuemor's lips curled up slightly. In your dreams. She was indeed an extraordinary little girl. Every decision she made was beyond his expectations, and it only piqued his interest and made him even more reluctant to let go of her. He also smiled. Little Xuemor, let's wait and see. The tip of his foot kicked off the surface of the water, and his body floated up as light as a feather. Together with the net, he carried Ning Xuemor and flew to the bow of the boat. The people on the ship were already boiling. Just now, Shwe Ilan and Ning Xuemor's conversation was sometimes high and sometimes low, so they also heard a few sentences. No one would have thought that the ordinary-looking Miss Shwe would have so many entanglements with this heavenly master. This master who didn't put anyone in his eyes was actually pursuing her, and she clearly didn't take this man seriously. Other than saying no, she kept rejecting him. It's not fair. It's not fair. Is this the so-called ugly people make more trouble? Is this the so-called good men don't have good wives? Everyone looked at Shwe Ilan with different gazes, all kinds of emotions. Of course, they also saw Ning Xuemor in Shwe Ilan's arms. Ning Xuemor was tightly held in Shwe Ilan's arms. Her small face was almost buried in his chest, so no one could see her expression. That kind of posture was too intimate. Who knew how many girls' hearts were broken? It also made the eyes of a few girls who had just been in love quietly turn red. Yang Ziyuan was worried about her good friend. She didn't care about anything else and hurriedly stepped forward. Shwe, are you okay? Did you choke? Ning Xuemor was still in Shwe Ilan's arms and only said a few words. I'm fine. You guys can leave. Yang Ziyuan didn't know what the red-clothed Evildor was planning to do by bringing her on board the ship. With his murderous temper, it was obviously not safe for Yang Ziyuan to stay on the ship. It was best for her to leave as soon as possible. Yang Ziyuan didn't understand the meaning of Ning Xuemor's words. She couldn't help but take a step forward. I heard that your voice is a little hoarse. Did you choke? I have some medicine for your throat. I said I'm fine, so I'm fine. Who asked you to be a busybody? Ning Xuemo's tone was very fierce, but she was a little anxious. If Xue Ilan found out that Yang Ziyuan was her friend, he might use Yang Ziyuan to threaten her. Yang Ziyuan was stunned. Xue. What's wrong with her? Why was he suddenly so impatient and fierce with her? Her face was slightly pale, and she was a little hurt. Rong Yang pursed her lips and smiled. Miss Yang, Miss Xue is now the master's personal person. It's enough that she has his concern. Why do you have to ask for it? Ha. Rong Yang's laughter disgusted Yang Ziyuan. She coldly looked at her. Rong Yang, if you don't speak in a strange way, no one will think you're mute. I can care for whoever I want. What's the matter? A sentence blocked Rong Yang's mouth. Rong Yang's face changed, but she still pretended to be a white lotus. Miss Yang, although you don't want to recognize me, I'm still your sister in name. I just want to care for you. I don't want to see you get bullied. Sister. Yang Ziyuan sneered. Her voice was cold. Your surname is Rong, and my surname is Yang. We don't have any blood relationship. What kind of sister are you? You want to enter the Yang mansion's door so much? You don't even want your own ancestors? These words were a little harsh. Chapter 482. Rong Yang was so mean in public that she couldn't continue to act like a white lotus anymore. Her face sank. Miss Yang, we as the younger generation shouldn't ask about our parents' right and wrong. But you've gone too far. Our father has already accepted my mother as his second wife. In any case, she should stay by our father's side. It's fine if you don't agree, but you're also trying to prevent them from reuniting and separating them. Is this your filial piety as a child? In this era, men marrying and taking in concubines was a very common thing, so the people present at most secretly laughed at Madame Rong's lack of virtue, but they didn't think there was any problem with Yang Daren taking in a second wife. In addition, Rong Yang intentionally or unintentionally created an image of her mother enduring humiliation in front of everyone. She even intentionally or unintentionally made people misunderstand that Rong Yang's mother was actually Yang Daren's childhood sweetheart. Because Madame Yang used a scheme to get the position of the mistress of the Yang family, Madame Rong was sad and married to the Rong family. After the decline of the Rong family, Yang Daren felt sorry for his old lover and took them to the Yang family. Then the two of them relapsed and got together again. Rong Yang's mother didn't care about the hatred of Madame Yang's interference. She was benevolent and righteous, endured humiliation and was willing to be a concubine. This kind of story was obviously more in line with the aesthetic of the poor couple, so everyone sympathized with Rong Yang's mother, who was placed in the outer residence and couldn't enter the Yang family. The people present were all scholars. This kind of people had a bit of pride and didn't fear power. They sympathized with the weak from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, seeing Yang Ziyuan being aggressive, they couldn't help but be a little angry. This mouth, that mouth, whether overtly or covertly, criticized Yang Ziyuan for being unfilial and arrogant and domineering. Rong Yang's weak posture won the sympathy of everyone, so she couldn't help but feel proud. Looking at Yang Ziyuan's green and white face, she felt particularly relieved. She began to habitually play the role of a white lotus and sighed softly. Everyone, Ziyuan is still young and insensible. I won't blame her as her elder sister. I only hope that she can see that her father is old and lacks a caring person by his side. She won't threaten him with her life and prevent them from reuniting. As for me, what's a little grievance? I only hope that my parents can live well and enjoy the happiness of a family. Yang Ziyuan was so angry that her hands were trembling. She was a straightforward girl and didn't know how to beat around the bush. At this moment, Rong Yang's words made her so angry that she raised her hand to slap Rong Yang's face, which made her feel incomparably disgusted. Her talent in telekinesis was actually quite good, and she had received guidance from a famous teacher in the Yang Manor. Her martial arts were also quite good, and this palm strike brought with it a sharp gust of wind. Rong Yang's talent in psychokinesis was average, and her martial arts practice was just so. Saying that her martial arts were flowery and impractical was a bit of an exaggeration. How could she escape from Yang Ziyuan's angry palm? He was so scared that his face changed. She screamed, "Brother Ziyan, save me." She had already finished her sentence, but the slap still hadn't landed on her face. Her heart stirred, and she opened her eyes. Jiyu Ziyan grabbed Yang Ziyuan's wrist with one hand. At the critical moment, it was Jiyu Ziyan who decisively saved her. Yang Ziyuan's slap was stopped halfway by Jiyu Ziyan. He held her wrist and said in a deep voice, "Ziyuan, don't go too far." Chapter 483. Yang Ziyuan's wrist hurt from being held by him, and her heart also seemed to hurt. She suddenly struggled. "Take your dirty hand away." Jiyu Ziyan's face slightly changed, and he subconsciously let go of her hand. He loosened his grip a bit too quickly, and Yang Ziyuan happened to be struggling with all her strength. Coincidentally, Yang Ziyuan was shaken a bit and retreated a few steps. She couldn't stand still and sat on the ground with a plop. Coincidentally, her head hit the corner of the table next to her. Blood flowed down her forehead. Everyone seemed to have not expected this scene, and they were all stunned. Jiyu Ziyan's face changed, and he reached out to help her. "Ziyuan." Yang Ziyuan seemed to have been scalded by fire, and her body slightly moved to the side, avoiding his hand. The little maidservant who accompanied her had already rushed over and hurriedly helped her up from the ground, almost crying, "Miss, you're bleeding." Yang Ziyuan shook her head. "It's okay." Her forehead was burning with pain, but compared to the pain in her heart, the pain in her forehead was nothing. Her forehead was bleeding profusely, and in the blink of an eye, it had already flowed to her cheeks. The little maidservant hurriedly treated her wound, but because she went out to participate in a zither recital, which was an event for scholars, the little maidservant didn't prepare any ointment for bruises. At this time, she anxiously paced around. "Miss, this servant should die. I didn't bring any ointment." "I have some here." A hand reached out, and there was a bottle of Jinchuang ointment in the palm. It was a very beautiful hand, and it was obvious that it was used to play the zither. Following the finger, it was Jiyu Ziyan's uneasy face. The little maidservant looked at Yang Ziyuan, but Yang Ziyuan turned a blind eye to that hand. She casually tore a piece of her sleeve, and raised her hand to wrap her head. "It's just a flesh wound, no need to use any medicine." She raised her sleeve, revealing her once white wrist. There was a dark purple circle around her wrist, which was caused by Jiyu Ziyan in a moment of desperation. Jiyu Ziyan's eyes moved from her bleeding forehead to her bruised wrist. His face turned even paler. He raised his hand and held Ziyuan's hand, which was about to be bandaged, and stuffed the ointment into her hand. "This wound must be treated, or it will leave a scar." Yang Ziyuan abruptly snatched her hand back. Her movement was big, and Jiyu Ziyan was also apprehensive. He didn't dare to hold her hand tightly, so she broke free. Even the medicine bottle in his hand fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. The ointment flowed all over the floor. "Pa!" With a loud sound, Jiyu Ziyan's heart seemed to shatter along with the medicine bottle. Jiyu Ziyan paused and looked at her angry eyes. "Ziyuan, I didn't mean to." Yang Ziyuan secretly took a breath and pulled the corner of her lips. "I know. You were just worried about Rong Yang. You can't allow her to be hurt." Yang Ziyuan smiled bitterly in her heart. She understood everything, but she couldn't see through the barrier of love. That's why she repeatedly got hurt because of small things. Her eyes seemed to be filled with tears. She didn't want to stay here any longer. She had already lost face, and she didn't want to make herself more embarrassed by crying here. She was about to bandage her wound and immediately get a boat to leave. Behind her, a hand silently stretched out. There was also ointment in the palm. "Miss Yang, use this." Yang Ziyuan raised her head and looked into the eyes of a black-clothed youth. The black-clothed youth's eyes were calm, but the hand holding the ointment was very steady. Yang Ziyuan breathed a sigh of relief. Chapter 484. The young man in black was her shadow guard. Yang Ziyuan was lively by nature and liked to run around. Her father was afraid that she would get into an accident, so he assigned a shadow guard to her, named Yifeng. Yi Feng was not much older than her, around 18 years old, but he was much calmer than her. No matter where Yang Ziyuan went, he would always follow her silently. Yang Ziyuan was at the age where she was rebellious. She worshipped freedom and hated it when someone followed her around, making her unable to have fun. So she cried and argued with her father a few times, asking him to remove this shadow guard. Unfortunately, her father had always complied with her wishes, but he refused to back down on this matter. Yang Ziyuan vented all her anger on Yi Feng. As long as she saw him by her side, she would never give him a good look. So Yi Feng really became a shadow guard, secretly following Yang Ziyuan around, making her unable to discover him. He would only appear when she met with extreme danger. 2 days ago, Yang Ziyuan went to the capital to watch the Heavenly Master's enthronement ceremony. She only brought a servant girl with her. Like a fat sheep, she wandered around outside and came back safely. In fact, it was all thanks to this shadow guard who helped her deal with all the dangers in the dark. This time when Yang Ziyuan boarded the ship, she did not see Yi Feng. She thought that she had finally gotten rid of him this time. But she did not expect that he had also boarded the ship and was so quiet that she did not notice him at all. Where was he hiding just now? Although she did not like him, but his appearance at this time helped her out of her predicament. She took the ointment from his palm and let the servant girl help her apply it. Yi Feng was very well prepared. Just as the servant girl finished applying the ointment for Yang Ziyuan, he handed over a tray of snow-white bandages. Jiyu Xian stood there and he was left hanging there. His fingers were clenched tightly in his sleeves. Yang Ziyuan's rejection of him was very serious. And that shadow guard was standing between him and Yang Ziyuan. He could not even see the corner of Yang Ziyuan's clothes. This shadow guard, in addition to being a Guqin master, Jiyu Xian was also a psychokinesis master. If they were to really fight, not many people present would be his match. He was also very good at judging people. Normally, when someone passed by him, he would be able to sense the strength of the other party's aura. From there, he could estimate the depth of the opponent's kung fu. It was rare for him to make a mistake. But today, he saw 3 people he couldn't see through. The first one was Ning Xuemo. This little girl didn't seem to have a high psychokinesis, but her aura was very strong. The second was Xue Yilan. This red-clothed man not only had a strong aura, but his psychokinesis was also unfathomable. Just looking at him made him feel anxious. That feeling was like a rabbit meeting a tiger. He knew that this person must not be provoked. The third was this shadow guard called Yi Feng. This youth was like a peerless sword hidden in its scabbard. He had a calm demeanor. Although he was silent, no one could ignore him. Jiyu Xian could not see the level of his martial arts at all. Yi Feng's face was not the kind of handsome face that was popular nowadays. His face was strong and simple. His face was handsome and his eyes were deep and calm like the sea. When he looked at Jiyu Xian, that kind of coldness made Jiyu Xian's heart turn cold. After Yang Ziyuan's head injury was bandaged, Yi Feng said, "Miss Yang, the boat has been prepared. Do you want to disembark now?" This person was very understanding. Yang Ziyuan could not wait to leave this place and Yi Feng had prepared everything for her. Yang Ziyuan was very satisfied. Chapter 485. Yang Ziyuan was very satisfied. When she looked at Yi Feng again, she didn't feel so disgusted. She nodded slightly. "Okay, let's get off the boat." She couldn't help but look in the direction of Ning Xuemo. She could leave, but her friend was still in that man's arms. Would she be in danger? That man's red clothes were as dazzling as the morning sun. She didn't know when he had sat down at the head of the table. Ning Xuemo was still trapped in his arms and couldn't even raise her head. He held Ning Xuemo with one hand and supported his chin with the other. He looked in the direction of Yang Ziyuan with interest, as if he was watching a play with relish. Seeing that Yang Ziyuan was looking at him, he patted Ning Xuemo's back. "Little Xuemo, your friend is really good. She suffered such a grievance and still can't let go of you." Ning Xuemo's heart was anxious. She wanted to kick Yang Ziyuan away. In such a dangerous place, the The sooner she left, the sooner she would be safe. Although she had only known Yang Ziyuan for a day, she already understood her temper. She was a passionate, naive, and chivalrous little girl. If she knew that she was in danger, she would probably blindly stay and provoke this Evildor. Her little life could be lost in minutes. She sneered and lightly said, "Friend? Who treats her as a friend? I just want to participate in this zither recital, win this prize, and use her as a ladder to cross the wall." This sentence made Yang Ziyuan's face turn white. She had a simple temperament, so she couldn't think of Ning Xuemor's thoughts. Today, she had been betrayed twice in a row, making her angry. She coldly snorted, "Okay, I recognized the wrong person. So you were just using me. Yifeng, let's go." Yifeng glanced at Ning Xuemor, then silently turned around and walked beside Yang Ziyuan. He didn't seem to have the consciousness of being a servant. When he spoke to Yang Ziyuan, he didn't bow and salute. When he walked with her, he didn't lag behind like a servant. Shui Yilan still sat there without any intention of stopping her. Ning Xuemor, who had been guarding against him, let out a sigh of relief. As expected, Yifeng had prepared a small boat under the ship. The small boat was made of ebony. Although it wasn't big, it was sturdy enough to accommodate 3 or 4 people. The suspension ladder to disembark from the boat had already been set up. The young maidservant led the way and boarded the small boat. Yang Ziyuan followed behind, while Yifeng brought up the rear. Yang Ziyuan's dress fluttered as she approached the small boat. The young maidservant had already reached out her small hand and stood at the bow of the boat, wanting to support her. Yifeng, who was walking at the back, suddenly had a change in expression. He flew up and picked up Yang Ziyuan, then turned around and flew away. Yang Ziyuan was caught off guard and cried out in alarm, "Yifeng, what are you?" Before she could finish her sentence, she heard a loud bang behind her, followed by the young maidservant's miserable cry. It went straight into Yang Ziyuan's ears. Following this loud bang, the suspension ladder also broke. At this moment, Yifeng hadn't rushed back to the ship yet. When the suspension ladder broke, he immediately fell from the sky with Yang Ziyuan in his arms. People on the ship cried out in alarm because they saw that the small boat had turned into a fireball. Yifeng and Yang Ziyuan were falling right above the raging fire. At this critical moment, Yifeng shook his hand, and a black ribbon flew onto the ship and wrapped around one of the masts. Yifeng pulled on the ribbon and flew up like a big bird. He finally returned to the bow of the ship and put Yang Ziyuan down safely. Chapter 486. Yang Ziyuan was still in shock. She calmed herself down and rushed to the bow of the boat, Zhu. Her servant girl was called Zhu. She was on the small boat that was on fire. At this moment, she had turned into a big ball of fire along with the small boat. There was no way to save her. Yang Ziyuan and Zhu were master and servant in name, but in reality, they were like sisters. When Yang Ziyuan saw that she had died for no reason, her eyes turned red and she almost jumped off the bow of the big boat. "Be careful." Yifeng pulled her back. His voice was still calm, "She is already dead. My condolences." Yang Ziyuan was so angry that she couldn't help but slap him. "What the hell are you doing? Why did you prepare a small boat that could catch fire?" She was heartbroken and lost her ability to think. "Pa." This slap landed on Yifeng's left cheek. Yang Ziyuan's hand was numb from the shock. She was also stunned. She didn't expect that she would really slap him. Yifeng's left cheek was left with a red palm print, but he was still as a mountain. Even his voice didn't fluctuate. "It's this subordinate's negligence." He apologized, but he didn't let go of Yang Ziyuan's hand. Yang Ziyuan didn't want him to hold her. She tried to shake him off, but she couldn't. She was so angry that she almost stomped her feet. "Bastard, why are you holding me? Let go." "Miss Yang, sorry to offend you." Yifeng didn't have the intention to let go of her. He used a little strength and pulled her closer to him. The people who heard the commotion frowned. They all felt that this shadow guard was too daring. He actually kept holding his master's hand. The concept of hierarchy in this world was very strict. The master was the master and the servant was the servant. Everyone present scolded Yi Feng, asking him to let go of their master. Jiu Zian also spoke. Yi Feng, she is the master and you are the servant. It's not proper for you to hold her like this. Yi Feng turned a deaf ear to everyone's reprimand. He looked around and frowned. Everyone also subconsciously looked at the surrounding scenery. Suddenly, they cried out in surprise, "Hey, where is this? What a thick fog. Is that a deserted island? How did we get here? No, this is not the lake. There is no island in the lake." Unknowingly, the surroundings were covered in white fog. The fog covered the sky and the surrounding scenery. People could only vaguely see the small island through the gaps in the thick fog. What was going on? Everyone looked at each other, a bad feeling rising in their hearts. The previously bustling ship was now like a ghost ship. The surroundings were gloomy, and even the lanterns hanging on the mast had become blurry, like will-o'-the-wisps in the fog. "What's going on?" someone asked anxiously. "Brother Xian, I'm scared." Rong Yang was like a little bird clinging to Jiu Xian's side. "Let's go into the cabin." Someone trembled and suggested, taking the lead to run into the cabin, as if it was safe there. "Brother Xian, let's go in too?" Ask the steward what's going on." Rong Yang also suggested, tightly pulling Jiu Xian's arm. Jiu Xian did not answer her. His eyes fell on Yang Ziyuan. Yang Ziyuan was pulled to Yi Feng's side. Her face was pale, but she was still calm. After her outburst, she had already figured out that the fire on the boat had nothing to do with Yi Feng. It was an accident that even Yi Feng did not expect. Chapter 487. Yi Feng had always been a reliable person. For such an accident to happen, it shouldn't be a coincidence, it should be man-made. She immediately thought of the mysterious red-clothed man. All these abnormal things, could it be that he was behind it? But he had no enmity with the people on this ship. Why would he do this? She couldn't help but look at Yi Feng beside her. Do you know what's going on?" Yi Feng did not answer her. Suddenly, he turned his body and pulled her behind him. It was a protective posture. His sharp and cold eyes looked into the cabin. Clap, clap, clap. There were 3 crisp claps in the cabin, and a lazy voice said, "I didn't expect there to be a master on this ship. Young man, your skills are not bad, you can still escape." The voice was slightly hoarse, but it was unusually magnetic and pleasant to the ears. It was Shui Ilan, who had been silently watching the show. "I don't know why you set up this puzzle, and I don't want to know. But my lady has no enmity with you, why do you want to kill her?" Yi Feng said in a low voice. "Must there be enmity before I can kill?" Shui Ilan chuckled, "I just like to." He answered as if it was natural, but it made everyone's expression change. "If you like to kill, then kill without asking for any reason. This theory is too demonic. This person is not a master, he's clearly a demon." Everyone looked at the chaotic scene around them, and they were all flustered. "Who the hell are you?" someone shouted. "I'm not a human." Shui Ilan's voice was light, as if it carried the murderous aura of a water ghost. It made people feel a chill down their backs. Not a human? Then he's definitely not an immortal. Could it be the legendary demon? "What is your purpose for coming here?" "I heard the sound of the zither and came here to compare notes with everyone." Shui Ilan answered elegantly. Everyone looked at each other again, and they secretly sighed in relief. If it was just to compare notes on zither skills, it wouldn't be too dangerous. "I don't know how the master wants to compare notes. Grandmaster's zither skills are brilliant, there are only a few people here who can match up to Grandmaster." Rong Yang boldly asked. "You mortals naturally can't compare to me," Shui Ilan replied bluntly, "but I can allow you to fight as a group." Team battle? What did he mean? Everyone didn't understand. Fortunately, Shui Ilan still had an explanation. "You can form a group of 8. If your Guqin can surpass mine, then you win." Everyone let out a sigh of relief. In terms of the beauty of the zither, They might not be a match for the red-clothed man, but 8 zithers against 1 zither was a sure win. All they had to do was to play the zither at the highest volume. If we win, will Your Excellency remove the camouflage and let us go? Of course. Then, what if we lose? If you lose, you'll naturally die, Shwe Ilan replied casually. On this boat, there was no lack of people with fiery tempers. One of them, although his zither skills were average, his martial arts were first class, and he had a small reputation in Changkong country. When he heard Shwe Ilan's words, he was dissatisfied and angrily said, "Even if it's a competition, you should pay attention to mutual consent. Your Excellency using such a petty trick makes people laugh coldly. We don't want to compete with you." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt something stuck in his throat, and his body was lifted up in the air. This person's hands and feet moved chaotically, desperately struggling. Chapter 488. The man struggled with all his might, but he couldn't break free from the shackles of the inexplicable power. His body flew backward involuntarily, and with a whoosh, he was thrown off the boat and fell into the water. After the man fell into the water, the force around his neck disappeared. He coughed twice and immediately moved his hands and feet, trying his best to pop his head out of the water. At this time, his heart calmed down a lot. He knew how to swim. Swimming more than 10 miles was like playing with water. He felt that although the scenery in front of him couldn't be seen clearly, it should be a trick. He should still be in the lake. The depth of the lake was only about 10 miles. He just needed to find a direction and swim. He had a good plan, but he didn't expect to see a black back swimming towards him as soon as he popped his head out of the water. Before he could react, the thing had already popped its head out of the round table and bared its sharp teeth at him. Help! The man tried to escape, but his speed in the water couldn't be compared to the monster. The monster bit his thigh and pulled him into the water. Violent splashes and streaks of red appeared under the water. The people on the boat were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. They watched as the man was torn apart by the monster and disappeared. There were only a few streaks of dark red liquid spreading in all directions in the rippling water. Monster! There's a monster in the lake. No, maybe this isn't the same lake anymore. Then where is this? Hell! Some of the timid girls were so scared that they lost control of their emotions and screamed. It's so noisy. Shwe Ilan sighed in the cabin. His voice was as soft as the wind, but it carried the darkness of hell's messenger. The 3 girls who screamed also felt their necks tighten. Their bodies were lifted into the air at the same time. They struggled with all their might, but they were also thrown into the water. Just like before, they were swallowed by the monster that suddenly jumped out of the water. The screams of the girls under the boat were ear-piercing. The people on the boat were all pale and their legs trembled. They didn't dare to make a sound. Hair. It's hair that's strangling them. It's a strand of hair. Someone with good eyesight finally saw it and couldn't help but shout. Hair. Or just one strand. Everyone looked at the cabin door and then at the bow. The distance from the cabin to the bow was at least 12 meters. How long was his hair? Strange. It was too strange. This was really not a human. At this point, no one dared to raise any objections. They could only agree to Shwe Ilan's conditions. Shwe Ilan chuckled as if he was very satisfied. They are indeed very obedient. He paused for a moment. Little Shuemor, they are much more obedient than you. Bastard, let go of me. Ning Shuemor's angry voice came from the cabin. Why should I let him go? Little Shuemor, you are too slippery. Once I let you go, you will run away again. Although I am very happy that you have found so many zither players for me, 100 of them are not as good as one of you. Shwe Ilan's words were very affectionate, but they also dragged Ning Shuemor into the water. Bastard, Ning Shuemor's rebuttal was suddenly blocked. She could only make a vague sound. Everyone looked at each other again. Was that girl called Shwe really in cahoots with this red-clothed devil? She obviously came to this zither recital with ulterior motives. Then they all looked at Yang Ziyuan. Although they didn't dare to complain at this time, their eyes were obviously angry. There would be a few more chapters during the day. Miu Miu created a new VIP group. The group number and the description of joining the group were posted at the top of the comment section. Chapter 489. Yang Ziyuan's face was pale. How could she not see the condemnation in everyone's eyes? She raised her chin and said in a low voice, "She's not on the same side as this person. I believe in her." Ning Xuemo was still trapped in Shui Yilan's arms. She didn't struggle because she knew that it was useless. She was just looking for an opportunity. But this opportunity was too slim. She hadn't found it yet. Shui Yilan's hand was still covering her mouth. Xuemo didn't try to push it away because this scoundrel had warned her that if she bit his finger, he would use his lips to block her mouth. Shui Yilan purposely pulled her into the water. She was originally sad because she thought that she would lose Yang Ziyuan as a friend. But she didn't expect to hear Yang Ziyuan's words. This short sentence warmed her heart. That silly girl. Didn't she know that protecting her friend at this time meant going against everyone present? Naive and hot-blooded. She was a bit like one of her subordinates in her previous life. At this time, Ning Xuemo had already made up her mind. She didn't care about anyone else, but she had to care about Yang Ziyuan's safety. Even if she herself was like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river, she still had the ability to threaten this bastard. If necessary, she would throw her life away. Little Xuemo, what kind of crooked idea are you thinking of now? Shui Yilan used his finger to lightly press her nose. His tone was gentle, but his actions were frivolous. Ning Xuemo simply closed her eyes and ignored him. I didn't think that a heaven-cursed lonely star like you would have friends. Shui Yilan lightly sighed. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The people outside already felt that the name Xuemo sounded familiar. At this moment, when they heard the words heavenly calamitous lonely star, they immediately thought of Ning Xuemo's identity. She's Ning Xuemo. Right, the orphan from Marquis Jingyuan's estate. So even her name is fake. She even said something about being called Shui Shui. Miss Yang, you treated her as a friend, but she might not. Even her name is fake. No wonder we encountered such an unlucky thing. It's because a heaven-cursed lonely star came on this ship. God, whoever comes in contact with her is unlucky. Although the discussion outside wasn't loud, Ning Xuemo's hearing was good, so she could hear every word clearly. She laughed bitterly in her heart. Heaven-cursed name as a lonely heaven-cursed lonely star's name. Oh right, how could it be her? Isn't she engaged to the heavenly master? Tomorrow is their wedding day. Someone blurted out the inside story. Ning Xuemo's expression slightly changed. The news of her marriage with Han Shanyu was only spread to the officials of the imperial court. It was unknown why Emperor Lixian had sealed this news, so the commoners did not know the inside story. She didn't think that there would be someone here who knew so much. Logically speaking, tomorrow was indeed her wedding day with Han Shanyu. If she didn't run away, she would be carried to the Heavenly Master's estate and married to the new Heavenly Master. Although she didn't want to marry him, it was better than falling into the hands of Shui Yilan. So it was better for her to stay still. Now that she couldn't even keep her life, Han Shanyu should have known that she had escaped. With his ability, it shouldn't be difficult for him to track her down, right? But he didn't show up. It seemed that he didn't take her seriously. You're actually engaged to that bastard? You promised him? Chapter 490. You're actually engaged to that bastard? You promised him? While Ning Xuemo was somewhat absent-minded, Shui Yilan's somewhat perturbed voice entered her ears. His handsome face was no longer full of smiles. Instead, it was completely gloomy. A dark aura surged out from his body, causing the usually calm Ning Xuemo to inwardly shiver. However, she fearlessly replied, "What does it have to do with you? What does it have to do with me?" Hey, good question. Shui Yilan sneered, "Since you're not going to say it, I'll verify it myself." Verification? You can verify an engagement. Ning Xuemore still hadn't recovered from her shock when her clothes were suddenly ripped apart by him. The sound of fabric being ripped apart was extremely ear-piercing. Ning Xuemore's expression changed. Bastard, what are you doing? She desperately struggled to push him away. However, at this moment, she was in Shui Yilan's hands. She was like a lamb in the hands of a butcher. She couldn't escape from his hands. Shui Yilan's fingers brushed her body. She couldn't move and could only watch as he took advantage of her body. He wouldn't want to force himself on her right here, right? This bastard would definitely do it. Ning Xuemore was both angry and angry. Her charming face was flushed red, and her heart almost sank to the bottom of the ocean. Although she was a modern person, she wasn't open-minded about sex. Her first time was still very important to her. This matter was mysterious and beautiful to her. It was an extremely solemn and sacred thing. Her first time should be with the person she truly loved, leaving a beautiful impression for the rest of her life. The aftertaste should be warm and intoxicating. She shouldn't just do it with any random man. This was the main reason why she ran away from the marriage. She felt that she didn't have any desire for Han Shanyu and was afraid that he would force himself on her wedding night. However, she didn't expect to escape from the wolf's den into the tiger's den. She successfully ran away from the marriage so she didn't have to worry about being forced by Han Shanyu. Instead, she was being raped by Shui Yilan. Bastard! If you dare to do anything to me, even if I die and turn into a ghost, I will hunt you down. Ning Xuemore gnashed her teeth. At this time, she was already prepared to fight this bastard to the death. No matter how valiant she was still a young girl. Under such circumstances, she couldn't help but feel nervous and afraid. Her big eyes were about to spit fire. You can't do anything to me when you're alive, but you think you're powerful as a ghost. Shui Yilan sneered. Obviously, he didn't take her words to heart. He lifted her chin with his finger and looked into her eyes. I forgot to tell you, this seat is very good at dealing with ghosts and whatnot. Even if you bite your tongue and commit suicide now, I can still capture your soul. You won't be able to escape from my grasp. His fingers were warm, but his words were colder than the cold wind. Ning Xuemore. What kind of pervert did she let out? Shui Yilan looked down at the curvaceous body in his arms and his eyes gradually heated up. I knew it. There was something fishy about you suddenly growing up. You actually ate the ice blue fruit and soaked in the original spring. Ning Xuemore was left naked in his arms. Her heart was filled with hatred and anger. Hearing him mention those two things, she immediately thought of the fruit Han Shanyu gave her and the hot spring she had soaked in it. Was there something special about those two things? So what if I ate it? So what if I soaked it? She tried her best to ignore her current awkward state. Fortunately, she was still wearing her panties and underwear. Although they were thin and short, at least it was better than nothing. Chapter 491. You don't know what it does, yet you dare to eat and soak in it. Shui Yilan stared at her chest. Her flesh-colored underwear rose and fell as she breathed. Ning Xuemore was well developed. She was tall and handsome, and her cleavage was well defined. Wearing that strange-looking underwear made her look even more seductive. Shui Yilan's eyes darkened. Ning Xuemore's entire body turned cold from his fiery gaze. She tried her best to divert his attention. What is its function? Don't tell me you don't know. The combination of these two can restore your original body. Shui Yilan explained. Suddenly, he thought of something and looked surprised. Aren't you 13 years old? Why do you look like a 16 or 17-year-old? Ning Xuemore's heart skipped a beat. She only knew the effects of these two things today. Restore my original body? Could it be the age to restore my soul? She was 22 years old in her previous life, but her face and body were still very young. She liked to wear her hair like a little girl with bangs, which made her look even younger. People often mistook her for a 16 or 17-year-old high school student. Could it be that her current body was her previous body? Of course, She wouldn't tell Ilan about her suspicions. She just glared at him and said coldly, "Can't I look older? My mental age is older. I always feel that you look younger." Ilan lifted the belt of her underwear with his fingertips. He lifted it a little higher. He was obviously doing something frivolous, but his expression was very serious. It didn't look like he was taking off a girl's clothes, but more like he was dismantling a bag of explosives. He finally broke the belt of her underwear. Ning Xuemore didn't have time to scold him. Her forehead suddenly heated up, and her eyes suddenly lit up. White light dazzled her eyes. It was as if a thunderbolt had exploded in her ears. With a loud crack, Ning Xuemore's body shook and seemed to fall to the ground. However, she couldn't react in time. There was only a line of words in her mind. "Damn, I was struck by lightning. I was struck by lightning again." Her ears were buzzing and her eyes were temporarily blinded. For a moment, she couldn't figure out what was going on with her. When the buzzing sound in her ears passed, she opened her eyes. Only then did she realize that she had already left Ilan's embrace and was lying on the ground. Although the clothes on her body had been torn by him, fortunately, they hadn't been torn off from her body. They were still half covering her body, covering most of her body. As for Ilan, even though Ning Xuemore was extremely nervous, she couldn't help but laugh out loud the moment she saw Ilan. After being struck by the thunderbolt, Ilan looked a bit weird. His bright red, fluttering robes were now half charred black and half dark red. The charred half was falling off piece by piece, while the dark red half was becoming thin and brittle. With just a slight movement, it started to crack horizontally and vertically. This wasn't the funniest part. The funniest part was his hair. Originally, his soft black hair was draped over his shoulders. When he walked, it was naturally flirtatious even if he didn't act coquettishly. But now, his hair was all standing up, like a porcupine with its hair standing on end, pointing to the sky. His handsome face didn't look any better. At this moment, it was as if there were dark clouds densely covering his face. It was even scarier than the green birthmark. His appearance reminded Ning Xuemore of the extremely miserable Ouyang Feng in the movie Eastbound Westbound. Chapter 492. How did he get struck by lightning for no reason? Ning Xuemore was extremely puzzled. Could it be that the oath he made that day was effective? No, he didn't make an oath in front of the Devil Lord. Oaths shouldn't have any effect on him. That mighty bolt of lightning just now was like the legendary heavenly lightning that the heavens used to punish evil people. Could it be that the heavens finally couldn't stand it anymore and sent down heavenly lightning to strike this pervert? No, the heavens shouldn't be so timely. Ning Xuemore suddenly remembered that she had been struck by lightning before and her heart skipped a beat. Could it be that she had an additional lightning flash skill when she was struck by lightning? It was effective at the crucial moment. Bastard. You really did agree to him. And it's a heavenly marriage. Ilan's voice sounded sinister. He looked at Ning Xuemore with a vicious gaze, as if he couldn't wait to eat her up. Ning Xuemore was stunned and finally realized that something was wrong. Could it be that when she casually agreed to Han Shanue's proposal by the lake, the heavens were the witnesses? Like an oath that couldn't be broken again? No, it can't be. How could it be so magical? That day when she was struck by lightning and had a cinnabar mole, it wasn't a coincidence but a mark, a proof. She couldn't help but raise her hand to touch her forehead. Just now, there was a sudden heat. Her cinnabar mole usually looked like it was drawn with a cinnabar brush and couldn't be touched. But now, when she touched it, it felt like it was slightly protruding and she could touch it herself. Ilan actually saw the cinnabar mole on her forehead a long time ago. But at that time, he thought it was a girl who liked to look beautiful and put on makeup. So, he didn't take it to heart and didn't care at all. Now that he saw Ning Xuemore raise her hand to touch it, his gaze naturally shifted there. When he saw it clearly, his eyes narrowed slightly. That Han Shanyu, he wasn't an ordinary human. When Ning Xuemore raised her hand, she finally realized that she could move. She rolled and wanted to jump up. A figure flashed in front of her and her acupoints were sealed again. She fell to the ground with a thump. I'll talk to you in detail later. Be good and wait here for now. Shwe Ilan lifted her up and carried her to a nearby chair to sit down. His scorched black robe rubbed against her body and face. When Ning Shuamore fell into his embrace, she could even feel the warmth of his skin. Shwe Ilan seemed to have suffered some injuries from the lightning strike, and his movements were not as nimble as before. His every move was no longer so frivolous. He moved a few times, and the red robe on his body had almost fallen off. It was even more tattered than the clothes worn by the beggars of the beggar clan. He cursed under his breath as he tore off his robe and threw it to the side. His outer and inner robes were already in tatters. Naturally, he didn't want to wear them anymore. He simply tore them off, leaving only a pair of underpants. Ning Shuamore had been staring at him hatefully. When she saw him suddenly take off all his clothes, she was shocked. She saw half of his naked body. Although this man was devilish, he had always been well dressed in front of Ning Shuamore. His clothes were not out of place at all. He was the kind of man who was dressed casually. This was the first time she saw him take off his clothes. She didn't expect that this devilish man who looked as thin as bamboo would have such a good figure. Broad shoulders, narrow hips, perfect collarbones, perfect Apollo's belt, well-defined 8-pack abs, and a lean waist. Everything was perfect. The only imperfection was that because he had just been struck by lightning, his face was still a little dark and his skin was a little yellow. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.